Welcome to Pick Me Up, I'm Scared, the podcast.
I'm your host, Madeline.
I'm your co-host, David.
And we are back after a small break. Sorry, everybody, with our second part of our episode on USAID, or as I've been calling it, USAID. And I'm confused why everybody else doesn't just call it USAID too. It's what makes sense.
It's, you know what? I yesterday was my aunt's birthday, and she was telling me about a friend of hers who was a USAID worker who himself called it USAID so I'm just saying,
all right. I got shooters on my side. Right.
But I will say, okay, so welcome back. Madeline was in a Bavarian town. She was trying to get with the times, go real folk German cottage core.
I started dating someone new, and we went on a little weekend trip together. It was very pure and cute and nice. But I will say, it's somebody who's not born and raised in California, and we just like drove up the coast for like a couple days, and they were appalled to learn about the mission system of California. They were like, these are just violent tools of colonization. California is not the progressive beacon I was promised. And I was like, oh yeah, welcome to our hell. As children, Californians have to make models of these violent mission tools of oppression and colonization out of sugar cubes.
It's so ruining sugar cubes in the process.
Yes. So many wasted sugar cubes.
No longer eat the sugar cubes.
Exactly.
I will say, one of the funniest things to happen to a former mission is that San Juan Bautista is now basically a giant shrine to the Hitchcock movie Vertigo. Like, there's no
it's like that's an improvement.
Barely it's like like some like Spanish like priests or something. But let us tell you about this fucking Hitchcock guy. He rocked. He was so sick. Comically, this is a fun fact. If you go back and rewatch Vertigo, the tower that Jimmy Stewart and is it Kim Novak in that movie? Can't remember that.
Maybe, yeah.
Like run up does not exist. If you go to San Juan Bautista, that does not exist. It's like a belfry, and the tower is a painting in the movie. Like if you watch the movie, it's a painting done by Alfred Hitchcock's daughter, and they have a whole thing about that. Wow. Which is like literally, I have to say, the two things I remember about the missions as a kid is eating horrible rock candy in the gift shop.
Yeah.
And like being like, so wait, what you're telling me is the coolest thing about San Juan Bautista is the part that doesn't exist. That's like fictional.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing cool about the missions. I think this is so interesting because, you know, when you grow up in a region, you have this like childhood experience associated with it and you assume it's universal. Similar to this is the first time I learned that people around the United States don't know what the Donner Party is.
Oh, I thought that was just like...
I thought that was universal knowledge. Huh?
That's like a pop culture joke. It's like they're trying to get to Sutter's Creek, but they don't get to... I don't know if they were actually going to Sutter's Creek, but they were like... Right.
I think San Francisco is where they were trying to go. But no, this is a thing. And like my friend who's born and raised here used to date somebody who was from Virginia, maybe West Virginia. And she casually mentioned the Donner Party. And he was like, what's that? What is that? And she's like, you know, the settlers who migrated west, and then they had too much hubris, and everybody kept telling them they were too late in the season. It was like the 1800s, and then they came to a snowy pass, and they got stuck because it turns out it was too late in the season, and then they all got snowed in, and then they had to eat each other. And he was just like, what the fuck are you talking about? And that's how we learned that maybe knowing about the Donner Party is more of a Californian thing than a national thing. So if you're listening, you know, on Spotify, you can leave us comments now. If you're not from California, have you heard of the Donner Party?
This is okay.
Maybe let us know. Maybe leave a comment. I'm curious because this blew my mind. I was like, everybody knows about this. No,
the Donner, but that's like there are like Simpsons jokes or some shit about that. That's like a very...
there? Or did we assume that because we joke about it so much out here?
Like I'm being gaslit.
I don't know. Maybe it's a Mandela effect. Okay, anyway, so the mission system is one of those things like the Donner Party where yes, if you were a Californian, you have to go travel up the coast, like every hour up the coast are these stupid fucking missions that the Spanish built to colonize the land and basically enslave the indigenous population. And it is extremely depressing and sinister and bizarre. And we as children had to go and be like, yay, the missions, and then build replicas of them and tour them all. And it was super, super strange. So yeah, it was funny showing like another adult this for the first time. And they're just like, what the fuck? You guys, nobody's apologized for this. Nobody's atoned for it. Nobody's like, the missions of California are a great sin. We need to like hang our heads in shame. Like, there's nothing going on like that here. And I'm like, no, but you can look at a picture of this guy with an ox inside of it.
You learn about the sparrows of San Juan Capistrano that nestle in the awnings during mating season and build little homes. I mean, right, the thing that I find really like some of the missions are like just kind of like some of them are like museums and shit now, and you can like walk around them for that purpose and shit like that. And then some of them is like Mission San Gabriel, where it's just like this building in the middle of a fucking town. There's like I don't
Santa
know.
Barbara, another
Yeah.
example. Ventura.
It's just like, that's there. But you so Spain and Bavarians, that was
That
your
was that was my little weekendy away. It was very
it's
cute. It was very wholesome, except for the reminders of the violent colonization and genocide of indigenous people in the United States, which we have not atoned for in any capacity whatsoever. And this is
I
what we say when everybody's like, you Californians are so lucky out there with your progressive Democratic Party leadership. We always try to tell you guys we have seen the end goal of the Democratic Party, and it is not great. It is not.
yeah, no, I mean, but that's I don't know if like for me, I'm like the missions are very like bad, and I will say you might be like by the time you're in high school, I want to say you're not getting like elementary school, you're building your sugar cube mission, you're like doing the whole in high school they're like so right the first mission, which I believe was San Gabriel, right, was the site of the enslavement and forced conversion of the Tonka people and what was like classically understood to be a genocide. I feel like I understood that by the time I was like 16.
I feel like I understood that, but I don't think anybody at school taught us that. We went to the same high school. Who was teaching us this?
Our history teacher, our American history teacher.
I had Mr. Austin. He was a communist.
Yeah, okay. So yes, me too.
Okay, so we had a weird outlier history teacher who was a communist in high school.
I
Told
like
us this.
I remember it being I put the grocery like the paper bag grocery bag around my history textbook.
Yes.
I think it was in that history textbook. It was like it was bad.
Okay,
Right?
all right. We did a little acknowledgement. We land acknowledged the genocide in our California history textbooks. I don't know. It's not enough. It's not great. Seeing it fresh through someone else's eyes, where you're like, and here's the mission system of California, the land in which I was born and raised, and just seeing the abject horror and confusion. It really, it's like when your house is super messy and you stop seeing the mess, and then a friend comes over and is like, are you okay? What's going on in here? Do we need to talk? And you're like, I didn't think it looked that bad. That was the experience I had, where I was like, oh, and now I'm seeing this through your eyes. And
yeah,
it's alarming. I see that it is alarming and bad. Yeah.
it's alarming and bad. I always like the thing that I always think about where I'm like whenever, especially because the only one because that I had like any intimate like experience of was San Juan Bautista, because I swear to God we went to that thing every single year between about third and eighth grade, uh, and like I was like every time like it was like just each year I was like this sucks like a little more. Like at first little kid, wow, big stucco building with intimidating crosses and everything's candlelit and so it looks real spooky. Right, like that was my aesthetic experience was like ooh, like by the time I was in eighth grade I was like this is kind of lame, like this is like a stupid little building that only represents a bad thing that like the coolest thing they have is like a poster that they clearly got at the local poster shop. It's not even like an original one of Vertigo, right? Like they
Right.
literally like went on like GeoCities because it was 1998 or whatever, and they like found the poster, and they were like, "Can you print this out at the local print shop?" and hung it up. And it's like this for like from genocidal maniacs, you guys have fallen really far.
You'd
Like,
expect better propaganda for them. I think that was really one of the things I noticed on this trip as well, is that I'm like, okay, we all know you're amoral and evil, but the thing I was not prepared for is that the photos in the historical museum, quote unquote, section of the mission were not even actual photos from the era. And it was an era in which people had cameras. But no, they were not
well,
photos. They were miniatures that had been set up meticulously to look like a real photo. And then a photo was taken of that. And then that photo was converted to like sepia and then printed out.
wait, what era
Yes.
are you talking about? No, because
Um,
right, like the initial colonization, that's like
no,
1500.
no, these were pictures from like the how the West was one days. Like there's a
Oh,
picture of one of
this is
my
like, come on.
old relatives in the 1800s, like from this era. It's like we could do the cameras by the 1800s. It was like in the, you
No,
know,
I was like, did you expect there to be like photographs of like Cortez like attacking the Aztecs or some shit?
oh, oh, but by the
Uh,
1800s, it's like if you don't have access to a photograph of this, maybe instead just do an illustration. Like do is
there
like
are paintings.
there
There
are
are
paintings.
there are copper plates. You've got a myriad of formats. But I think it's like they're doing colonization museum of Jurassic technology.
They
They're
kind
putting
of are. That's an LA deep cut. If you're in LA, go check
that,
out.
that is there
If you're
is
not in LA, that is not that is a deep cut.
there is a New York Times best-selling book about that place.
No, but no, this is even more obscure than the Donner Party. I don't even think everybody in the country knows about the Donner Party. You think everybody in the country knows about the Museum of Jurassic Technology?
Yes, and
No, you know.
the pink pigeons and the owner playing like weird historical instruments on the rooftop. That's everyone knows that. That
Nobody knows about this, David. I swear. Okay, whatever.
is
We
okay.
had
But
we had some time off is the point of that. And now
I
we're
will say, can I tell you one thing that I did and give you my little recap
I would love
of
it. I would invite it. I would delight in it.
So I went with my lovely girlfriend to the Felix Art Fair, uh, which I have heard unconfirmed, but good-ish type rumors that maybe someone died at the Roosevelt Hotel during Felix Art Fair. So to be updated.
This
Uh,
year? Like this
this
one?
one,
Okay. Okay.
and I have
Okay.
some real funny stories about Bacchanalia that happened from a lot of one of our mutual friends at the art fair, which I'll tell you about later. But so a couple weeks ago was essentially like Arts Week in Los Angeles. At the moment, the Getty, along with a lot of corporate sponsors, including people like Bank of America, is hosting a series of exhibitions called Pacific Standard Time. The theme this year is art and technology, which is one of the corniest fucking themes I could possibly fucking imagine.
So that's
Uh,
why that guy had that whole AI thing that Lizzie and I went to.
Wait, you went to the one in at the Coliseum?
No, not the Coliseum. It was at that is that maybe Hauser and Wirth? It's the gallery across the street from
Oh,
the
yeah.
museum on Wilshire.
Well, we're gonna get to the AI shit because the AI shit is it's art washing. It's fucking art washing because it's
It's
all these,
horrible. It's horrible.
but it's all of these fucking corporate sponsors doing AI shit who are at the same time funding AI or like funding AI stuff with, for example, the Israeli military to do like, you know, drone bombing in Gaza. Well,
Horrible.
uh, but so one of those was I can't remember the name of the artist, but it was a guy I want to say the like USC Coliseum who set off daytime fireworks and then interacted with like a proprietary AI chat bot
What?
thing. It and apparently
We
people
are
in
in hell. We are living in hell.
people in the surrounding fucking neighborhood, several people were injured, and a bunch of people thought like bombs had gone off
Oh my
because hearing like
God.
daytime fire, which is like not something you fucking expect,
No.
right? It's fucking psycho. But so at the same time, Freeze happened, a giant art fair, and then Felix, which is like the smaller one, and credit to my girlfriend, this was her observation. You can really see like the vacuity of the contemporary art world by the fact that they literally were hanging up all of these artists in literal fucking hotel rooms so that you had actual goddamn hotel art, right? And I will
Wow.
tell you, I have some predictions for 2025.
Okay.
Uh, bunnies.
Okay. I think that's true. I think bunnies will trend. Yeah. I I
Bunnies
I just designed some bunny stuff for work, so that makes
are
sense.
trending.
Yeah.
Uh, we saw some dolphins.
Oh,
Uh,
dolphins, I can see that too. For sure, dolphins. Yeah.
saw a dolphin or a boros that was like if one of those like galleries in like beachside resort town uh had done Lisa Frank,
Yeah.
uh that was bad.
Uh-huh.
uh yeah, I heard about chickens. I heard there were chicken paintings. I did not see any chicken paintings.
Were they
uh,
paintings of chickens or paintings done by chickens?
That would have been more interesting. It was paintings of chickens,
Okay.
apparently. I
Okay.
didn't see them. The best thing I saw was that one of the gallerists, one of the like identical women who gets hired to like sit in these hotel rooms and like interact with like some of the most annoying like Pharrell Space Hat type rich people. Uh, she had a large glass of white wine hiding behind her little chair with a half empty bottle of Diet Coke. Best art of the fucking thing. But I just art's done, guys. It's done.
Art's done. We actually have a pretty good episode about the art world, which I've
Hmm.
talked about. It's called Who Arted in here, and then in parentheses, aka He Who Smelt It Dealt It. I think it's pretty good about the art world. I think it's topical. I think you can go back through our old episodes and listen to it. Stand by that episode. I think it was a banger.
Oh, one thing I will say that is a kind of addendum to that episode is that as and this also um my girlfriend has mentioned stuff about this, but has pointed me in the direction of articles. The art market has like fallen by more than half of its revenue over the last years. So there was a huge boom starting round about 2015, and in the last year, the market has fallen off in sales by about half. Sotheby's has fired a bunch of people. MoMA has fired a bunch of people, and it's going to hit the mid-level galleries the hardest because those galleries were the galleries that sprung up in the wake of the boom. And that's why I think you're like artwork was for a while seen as like this like real life NFT ass speculative investment.
Yes.
Right?
That's
Like,
what our whole episode's about. Yeah, the speculative money laundering element of art collecting.
and that's like slightly like fallen apart, which is I think why you're getting more decorative stuff because it's sort of like it's like people grasping at straws to get something that will fucking sell and that will look good on like a rich idiot's like living room wall. So
Right. Right.
that
Very, very fascinating. I mean, I feel like everything economically is collapsing right now.
it's true. I don't know if you saw the Axios article that the State Department under Rubio is using AI to identify pro-Hamas supporters at U.S. campuses, i.e., anti-Israel, pro-Palestine protest, like student protesters.
Wow.
So tying it all together, the State
Okay. All right.
Department, the collapse of USAID,
Let's get into part 2 of this, shall we?
Yeah, let's do it. We're in the 90s, right?
Okay, yeah. So if you guys listened to the last episode, you'll know that we left off. I believe we left off in like the 80s under Reagan, and so we're going to pick up today not with the first Bush, but instead with the Clinton era, because the first Bush era, you know, it's important to note that USAID was up to things under every single president. But if we did a whole overview, this would be another 6-part episode, and next week, fun little drop here. We're going to try to do our first episode working in conjunction with Means TV, and that has to be a standaloner. So we had to kind of make sure we just only did the important stuff, so this part 2 would be wrapped up on USAID. So we're going to jump into the Clinton era. There's some juicy stuff in here. Huh?
Saxophones.
If you don't remember, Bill Clinton was considered very sexy as a presidential candidate because he played saxophone. He was also extremely conservative. Even though he ran as a Democrat. And his whole thing was that he was going to balance the budget. And he did balance the budget, and many economists agree that it actually probably functionally ruined our economy.
It also, right, like it involved defunding or like drastically reducing funding for things like the Department of Education, which led in like one of those funny knock-on effects to the ballooning of tuition costs and the privatization or responsibilization of student debt to families, which meant that the loan industry blossomed.
Right.
That's not USAID.
But it is important to note about like the Clinton era, and when we're talking about just capitalism on the whole, you have to remember like liberalism comes from like classical liberalism or neoliberalism, which are economic policies that are built around maintaining and expanding the reach of capitalism, things that have to do with free markets, right? Free trade. And even later on with protecting American business interests by offering them a lot of like government leeway to go out and continue privatized industry on behalf sometimes of the United States government around the globe. And that is something that has to do with USAID. So all of these super neoliberal economic policies that we saw implemented by every president, Democrat and Republican alike, including Clinton, have to do with, cutting federal spending and increasing privatization as a replacement for that federal spending. And that does involve wow, Freudian slip, organizations like USAID, because we know that they work with companies like Coca-Cola or DuPont to go into these other countries where they are ostensibly offering aid and just do really backhanded business deals with major American corporations that lead to those corporations getting increasingly more wealthy. So the Clinton era, in the midst of these budget cuts, they're expanding privatized business efforts to come in and pick up the slack where the federal government has decided they are not doing spending anymore. And USAID is involved in this. So in 1994, a new unit of USAID was actually approved by Congress in the midst of all of this under Clinton, and it's called the Office of Transition Initiatives, or OTI. Now, OTI is highly controversial as a unit under USAID. They operate overseas and they basically have free reign to perform as the CIA did during the Cold War in whatever country USAID wants to go into.
They're drinking martinis. No, it's the 90s. They're drinking apple teenies.
They're drinking apple teenies. They're wearing mini skirts.
What else?
They're very fat phobic. That was the 90s.
They're a Barbie girl in a Barbie world.
That one. They love grunge.
But like cool grunge.
Yeah, maybe.
Not like weird dorks in Aberdeen.
Right. Yeah. So this is the era of OTI. And even the name, Office of Transition Initiatives, this is a regime change kind of division. This is coup central. Transition initiatives, come on. What are you transitioning in and out of? Political structures.
Like what we were talking about before we started recording is that like one big thing happened during H.W. Bush that is like a worthwhile little sort of contextual thing to maybe just like point out for anyone listening, which is that the Soviet Union fell apart. It's
in 1991, and not just fell apart. The leaders of the Soviet Union by the 90s actively chose to dismantle it,
and it became like, so at this point you get like predictions of like the American century and a unipolar powers, like global power structure and also a lot of fucking economies that had relied upon trade with the Soviet Union suddenly fell into like intense recessions or depressions.
Right. So these are
Right.
business opportunities for the United States. Hey, and on the flip side of this, something that David and I were also talking about before we started recording is you have to remember that with the USSR gone, there is no external pressure, there's no leverage for Americans to get social spending from our government. See, back when the USSR existed, the United States government did feel some pressure to do social spending in a major way to make sure that Americans' quality of life was surpassing the USSR's. We know by the 1950s, for example, the USSR's life expectancy had surpassed the United States. There were all of these things that the USSR was providing for its people that was making the United States at a certain point look bad. So as long as the USSR existed, the United States kind of had to play this game of doing increased social spending in order to look like capitalism could compete with communism on a global market, because otherwise communism was starting to look really, really good. And the United States knew that communism and a communist rebellion could be imminent in the USA. And that's really interesting too to think about, because I think in the United States, a lot of us think that like a communist rebellion is really unrealistic, but the CIA didn't think so. The federal government didn't think so. They still don't think so. That's why we dedicate so many resources towards trying to stop the spread of communism.
Yeah,
So
sorry, Freudian slip. We dedicate, we,
me
Madeline.
working for the CIA, me and the Fed.
I will also say there's like all the more straightforward sort of like kind of economicist explanation, which is that you get a form of fucking military Keynesianism in the sense that like I had a philosophy professor whose initial PhD funding had come through like either DOD or State Department shit because like they were just throwing money at anything they fucking could, which meant that you get this huge balloon of like college graduates, post grad people, all of the social spending that is an attempt to like bolster the sort of like US economy as like a war mobilization effort through especially the 50s.
Yes.
Right.
This is totally true. A lot of what we were doing that helped to develop the United States was in the pursuit of us competing with the USSR, maybe even just on paper, like, hey, look, our numbers are just as good as yours, ha. But also in a lot of ways, militaristically. It's like we started throwing money at education because we're like, they're making scientists over there. They're putting people in outer space and they're beating us at it. We need scientists. We got to start funding science. We got to start funding academia here. And that really helped encourage things like education grants like you were talking about, David. So by 1991 though, the USSR is gone. So we enter the Clinton era and Clinton's like, guess what? There's no leverage here. We don't have to compete with anybody anymore because the great communist experiment fucking donezo. So we can come in and slash and burn the federal budget. We can cut all of this social spending that we have been doing to try to compete with the USSR. And who's going to tell us we're failing? And a great example of this is that, back in the USSR, housing costs, for example, for people there ranged between 4% to 10% of your monthly income, depending at different times and what subsidies were going on. And that includes utilities. So for a long time in the United States, we were taught to never spend more than 25% of your monthly income on housing. That would be ridiculous. Now, the majority of Americans spend over 50% of our monthly income on housing. So you see things like this, like the USSR. If I lived in the USSR today, I would be spending $259 a month on housing, right? If I had the average, I think most people paid 6%. Instead, I'm spending like, including utilities, like $27.50 on housing. So, these kinds of changes that have happened in the United States over time have also been the direct result of us not having to compete with countries like the USSR, or like countries, I guess, but like places like the USSR who were doing it differently. So this is when we really see politicians be like, cool, we don't have to pretend to compete with 6% housing costs. We can privatize and deregulate everything. Landlords charge whatever the fuck you want. Federal spending, cut it, get rid of it. Welfare queens, quote unquote, stealing all our money. Ew, don't give poor people money, slash it, burn it. What are they going to compare us to? There's no other options. The great communist experiment failed. So
But it's also,
Hmm.
oh no, I mean it's also just like right, like we've done episodes about like the Chicago Boys or whatever that we're doing shock doctrine, and of course that's going to happen domestically, but it's happened. So to get back to Office of Transitional Initiatives, I'm
Yes.
going to assume that they are like hey, wouldn't it be cool if you privatized everything?
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly this. So the pursuit of privatizing everything also means making sure that foreign markets are available for American business interests to exploit, to either utilize for labor or to utilize as a new purchasing base. So this means that all of these other countries have to make sure that they are on track to do free market capitalism that lets American business come in. So that's why things like regime change and coup attempts are so essential to American foreign policy, because we don't want anybody going commie. So what ends up happening is this new branch of USAID, which had originally kind of been a funding arm for CIA operations, gets its own little miniature version of the CIA operating within it called the OTI. And
It's really a Russian doll.
it's a Russian nesting doll, ironically enough, of bigger and littler CIAs all stacked into each other.
It's Alan Dulles is all the way down.
All the way down, yeah. Like turtles all the way down, Alan Dulles is all the way down. So they operate under the direction of the State Department, the Pentagon, and other security agencies. So there is no doubt this is like a military effort, right? So their goal is to boost support for local governments that the United States approves of, or local potential governments that the United States approves of. So, really, their goal is to foster regime change and uphold coups and maintain the power of recent government shifts from coups that have occurred in order to keep the money flowing to the USA and our business interests. So, in a Congressional Research Service report from 2009, OTI's activities were described as, quote, overtly political, and based on the idea that, quote, timely and creative U.S. assistance could tip the balance towards outcomes that advance U.S. foreign policy objectives. So, not getting it twisted, they are out there doing covert, basically spy political shit. They are threatening the sovereignty of other countries. We are meddling. This is how USAID is meddling through this
They're also
OTI.
distributing contraceptives. That's like,
They're also distributing contraceptives
it's
sometimes.
like,
Yeah.
hey man, like, listen, you're only gonna get the good condoms, like the name brand condoms, if you like privatize everything. Otherwise, you get like the weird, like off-brand condoms that you get at like the Planned Parenthood, and
That you're
those,
not even sure if they're really working. They're
and
probably working. They're probably
yeah,
working. Use the Planned Parenthood condoms. But
no, they're all great, but
they're all great, but no, this is true. Like, and so a lot of the USAID initiatives that we think of as actually like helping people, they are overt fronts for regime change stuff, which we're going to get into later on when we talk about how USAID started HIV clinics that were literally not even HIV clinics. They were literally there just to recruit people to try to overthrow the Cuban government. But that's a little foreshadowing for later. So in the Clinton era, one of the kind of places we see USAID stepping in is Serbia. So there's this student group in Serbia called Otpor, which is resistance, and they had been central in the overthrow of Milosevic, right, in the year 2000 at the tail end of the Clinton era. And Otpor had been funded by both the U.S. government and also like NGOs affiliated with the U.S. government. You know, so NGOs, non-governmental organization, but you need to remember it's that thing in name only. Usually they are heavily government affiliated. Places like the National Endowment for Democracy, that's the biggest one we think of. So USAID was involved in this, in funding this student group that ended up overthrowing Milosevic. And USAID directly had given hundreds of thousands of dollars to this student group. So when we talk about color revolutions, these are fake revolution attempts basically that pop up in other countries to try to rally in support of like a pro-Western, pro-capitalist kind of leadership in place of whatever's existing there. You know, no matter how good or bad you think what's existing there is, these are sovereign nations, and the United States is basically paying certain student groups to go in and try to create fake quote unquote organic movements towards Western backed capitalist
to be
enterprise in the
clear,
region.
this Madeline is not coming out as pro Milosevic.
This is not me being like love the guy, but you know
Listen,
this is an example of how the United States is meddling in other countries.
let me ask you a question.
Hmm.
It's 1993, right? Soviet Union, it's gone,
Yeah,
right? You're in Serbia, you're a student, you've got blue jeans, you've got McDonald's,
Voice of
Right.
America is playing on the radio.
You're listening to Material Girl. Uh, you're like, that's true. I am a material girl. It is a material world. And
Radio
you're
Liberty is like, don't you want to be just like the United States?
that's I do remember that hit from 1993. Great song. Uh, but like you're looking at around and you're like, of all the student groups, the one with like the best like food, it's the one with like the US backing. You're joining the like they have like the best party.
They're going to have the best stuff going on. Yeah. And it was a pretty successful student resistance group. Also, in Serbia, a considerable amount of money was also channeled through covert American aid, like things that we don't even know about. But we have documentation of USAID basically not just giving to this student group, but doing like covert aid operations. So we
They
really
get
see.
both student groups.
Oh, they probably did. They probably, this is a thing, like, this is what's going on in obviously Syria as well. The United States is involved in multiple different groups on the ground trying to basically hedge our bets. And we're basically trying to create a civil war in these countries when we do this. Like, USAID is there basically with the goal of creating a civil war. And we know there's going to be multiple factions opposing each other in different ways. And any of the factions that we think could be advantageous to us, i.e., anti-communist, anti-socialist in some capacity, we are going to fund. And even sometimes they end up fighting each other, and we're funding both of them because we're like, whoever wins, we got to be in with one of these guys.
Yeah.
So Serbia is a kind of good example because we know exactly the student group that USAID was funding to try to do this regime change coup attempt thing. And they had been successful. They had been a central part of overthrowing Milosevic. So that takes us next to Haiti, which is the biggest thing that happened probably under the Clintons that has to do with USAID. So the Clintons had become increasingly involved in Haiti, and they had worked to kind of move things around in the country in ways that were obviously advantageous to American capital. And we just did a multi-part episode about the Haitian Revolution that ended with the United States basically walking into Haiti and stealing I think it was $500,000 in gold, some large sum of money in gold, and just taking it back.
For inflation, by the way.
Yeah.
$500,000, not.
Okay.
I'm like, yeah, just to be clear, that it's not like they stole like one bourgeoisie house in Haiti. They stole
Yeah.
a lot of fucking money.
It was a lot more. Yeah. So $500,000 back then. And then took it to a bank basically on Wall Street. And they were like, that's our money now. And then we started controlling how Haiti spent its own money. Basically, we controlled a large sector of their banks. So this is coming off of this history of American intervention in Haiti. And in the 1990s, the Clintons, just like every other American kind of presidential group or administration, is like, there's something we can gain from Haiti. So Bill Clinton was pushing for changes to Haiti's agricultural sector that would basically make them more dependent on the United States for food crops as a trading partner. So by 1994, there had been 3 years prior a military coup in Haiti, the same year the USSR fell, actually. And Bill Clinton, just 3 years later, 94, orders a US invasion to be like, look, get in there, get rid of the junta that had seized power, and we are going to take the guy who had been in control before and we're going to restore him to his position of power. And we're going to make him basically work with us, the United States government, to do all this shit that's economically advantageous for us. And then, 15 years later, Bill Clinton would actually get appointed as the UN special envoy to Haiti. And he would be involved in trying to, quote unquote, help the country develop its private sector, right? To kind of bring money into the economy was how they pitched it. And we all know the private sector, right? To try to build this kind of capitalist foundation of an owning class. And the private sector also is going to be heavily dependent on outside businesses, places like the United States. So by 2010, the Clintons had become two of Haiti's like biggest basically benefactors, if you want to think of it that way. They had a personal philanthropic fund called the Clinton Foundation, and they had 34 different projects operating in the country to try to do things in a way there that would benefit Americans, basically back home.
Episode idea. The Clinton Foundation.
Oh, that's a good one. Should I add it to the list?
Definitely, yeah. Because it's one of those like all of these. This is comically when I was talking to my aunt yesterday. She was like, "Yeah, like the thing that like what her friend who was in USAID told her was she was like a lot of these things are really informal, right? Like where it's like some representative who's like the USAID condom distributor for Haiti or whatever, like or like trading partners like, oh, I know a guy in some like other company, we're just going to deal with that guy because we know him, right? And so that's how like these like private public partnerships work. So like we're like thinking about the Clinton Foundation and all of these private nonprofit fucking advocacy groups as like, no, they are weird extensions of the same sort of like, ruling class motherfuckers. And like just because they're not politicians doesn't mean they don't suck.
Yeah.
Uh,
And they're
are
working that's the thing about capitalism. It's the marriage of business and government. That's really what capitalism is, right? Business and
well,
government hand in hand working together.
it's also yeah. No, I was like, I mean, I was just like, sure, that's a good definition of that. I don't think Adam would be stoked on it, but
Well, it's true. I mean, with profit as the main goal. Ah, there you go.
yeah,
It's
no,
really
I mean,
profit.
right, like, I like another way of saying that is that under capitalism, the state is the political arm of the business class,
Yeah.
right?
Yes. So, basically, the Clintons' role in Haiti started under Bill Clinton's presidency, where he was like, okay, we're going to use foreign aid administered through places like USAID as a tool of political power, right? Which is what we talked about in the first episode. It's a tool of political soft power. And we're also going to try to use it in a way that attracts foreign financing there to basically build privatized businesses that exploit the local population, but also maybe helps build some infrastructure that makes it easier for us to get the gains of that exploited population out of the country. And this is something we see with like imperialism. One of the first things that happens when an area is colonized is the imperial force that's doing the colonization. They come in and they build a lot of infrastructure, but it's not to benefit the local population. It's to make it easier for them to extract resources that they are taking from the exploited people there and siphon them back to the home country. So they're building roads, they're building airports, they're building like seaports, they're doing a lot of this. So this is kind of what the plan was there. But they would say on top of that, if you lived in Haiti and you were a taxpayer, because these businesses were doing all this nice infrastructure stuff for you, you actually have to pay them back with your taxes for this work that they're doing there.
Oh, so it was like they again, Haiti is again going into involuntary debt for
Yes,
some shit they didn't ask for.
exactly. So Hillary Clinton always called this economic statecraft, which is like sounds like a throwaway term, but it's actually really sinister and harrowing. Like statecraft, that's like basically what,
Uh-huh.
like it's Department of Defense shit. So economic statecraft. That phrase really sums up USAID's role in the federal government. It is economic statecraft. It's neoliberalism, right?
It's
That's
new. It's also it's just like it like at its most basic level, it's it's kind of funny because on the one hand, yes, it's neoliberalism. On the other, it's forcing like Haiti, like another country, into a state of dependence on the United States, which tends to right like it's like a little askew of like massive privatization. Like there's always this like weird, not quite contradiction, but thing where it's like privatize everything. You're dependent on our largesse for anything in your fucking country. Does that make
yeah,
sense?
but that's the thing. It's because our government operates in the interest of our American businesses. So
Yeah.
by saying privatize everything, you're like privatize it with our American businesses that are directly tied to our American government.
Yeah.
Haiti, obviously, 2010, Bill Clinton's no longer president, but the Clintons are still actively involved there, continuing the work that they had done starting under his presidency. And a 7.0 earthquake hits, I think a lot of us remember this, in Port-au-Prince. And this was 10 million people living in Haiti at the time. 1.6 million people were displaced from the earthquake alone, and 316,000 people are thought to have died. So obviously, Haiti's economy after this massive earthquake,
It's fallen apart. There's
it,
no economy.
there's no economy. Houses destroyed, businesses destroyed, and like in the most populated areas, like huge areas of the country, urban areas, infrastructure gone. So within days of the earthquake, the Clinton Foundation is like, okay, we got to go in there and fix this because Haiti's our weird little freaky pet project from when we were president. And
Close
Bill,
the
hmm,
door.
what'd you
He,
say?
when God closes a door,
He
he
opens a window. That's what the Clintons were saying.
a
They're like,
window
we're gonna get in there.
specifically in Port-au-Prince. The
Important.
window. Sorry.
It's always capitalists saying there's opportunity in Haiti. Like if you've ever watched Arrested Development, the TV show, the grandfather of the family, George Bluth, he had started building this like huge capitalist empire with a banana stand where he sold bananas like on the boardwalk, like chocolate covered bananas or something like that. And he got arrested for like money laundering in the show. And in the show, he would always tell his family, there's always money in the banana stand. And they always just thought, like, oh, you can make money in the banana stand because that's how I started my empire. And finally, the family rebels and lights the banana stand on fire. And he's like, you fucking idiots. There's money in the banana stand. I laundered a bunch of cash and taped it to the walls inside of the banana stand. There are millions of dollars inside the banana stand and you lit it on fire. But anyway, so him always saying, like, there's always money in the banana stand is like the United States government equivalent in Haiti. They're like, there's always money to be made in Haiti. There's always money in Haiti. We just have to go, totally dismantle it and take it apart and get these sketchy, ill gotten gains out of Haiti. And this is really the United States government's approach to Haiti always. So, yeah, the Clintons are like, there's always money in Haiti. Let's go see what we can exploit in the wake of this tragedy. So, Bill Clinton is co chairing a commission that's tasked with the job of directing relief spending. And Hillary Clinton at the time is US Secretary of State. So, she's overseeing four, basically, and a half or so $1 billion that Congress earmarked to be sent to Haiti through USAID. Basically, that's how USAID is getting this funding to Haiti, and Hillary Clinton's in charge of it, and Bill Clinton is also, the co-chair of this commission. So, Jonathan Katz, who's a journalist who has been covering Haiti extensively in the past like 20 years or so, in 2015 wrote, at every stage of Haiti's reconstruction, fundraising, oversight, and allocation, a Clinton was now involved. And this was all being done, again, through USAID. So the post-earthquake project was wild. There was like so many different things going on that USAID was directing funding towards. And one was a 600-acre industrial park called Caracol, which was $300 million alone, this project. And this was supposed to be located on Haiti's northern coast. So the United States...
Used local contractors. It was really a jobs creation problem for Haitian. Oh my God. It poured money into the local economy, right? That's what you're gonna and that rocks. The Clintons are good people.
End of episode. End of episode. We love USAID. No. So the United States government is like, not only are we going to build this industrial park, we're also going to build a power plant and we're going to build a new port. And that means that companies who would be operating at this industrial park, Caracol, would be able to ship in all their materials and ship out finished products. And a lot of what was going on there, relevant to my interest, was garment manufacturing. So they're like, look, if we build this port, you're going to be able to send raw cotton in, and then you're going to be able to convert it in textile mills here in Haiti, and then use those textiles to sew into garments, and then you're going to be able to ship out the finished t-shirts, jeans, whatever from that same port.
And those garment factories had living wages, which is why all tunnel vision garments made in Haiti.
Yeah, 90% home ownership rate in Haiti, months of paid time off, retirement age of 55, minimum work age 2 years older than the United States. Oh, my bad. I'm describing China, not Haiti.
Yeah, okay. It's
Yeah.
So
Okay.
we're gonna build some That's
So
what they
the Clintons are like, look, this Caracol project is gonna be great. It's gonna be open for business in Haiti. And this British economist Paul Collier, both him and his colleague Jean-Louis Warnholz advised the Clintons in a number of things. And in the Financial Times, 2 weeks after the earthquake, they were just like, we actually don't know why people keep trying to extract money out of Haiti. Haiti, they said, quote, has failed, and failed again. So they're like, this place is just getting fucking destroyed, basically. Like, you can't, he's already down. Stop kicking him, Like, what are you going to get out of this country at this point?
it does kind of like the way they're wording it, not good, where it does kind of sound like they're like, look, we took all we could out of Haiti. That happened by like 1821. We got right, and then we made them pay us for everything we'd taken. There's nothing left. There's nothing
There's
with
nothing
this
left.
is
But they're like, you know what? If we build the ports, maybe it'll work this time.
uh-huh.
So they're even like, I don't know why they're doing this, but the port thing might work. So it's like they're not even seeing their own contradictions. So like if we do this, then maybe it will actually attract enough private foreign investment where it doesn't matter if Haiti fails because these companies are basically running Haiti now. So this was happening in what 2010 basically. By 2020-ish, the industrial park was just considered to be totally a failure at this point. The port also a complete failure. Remember, USAID is supposed to be funneling $4.5 billion into these Haiti reconstruction projects, $300 million of which alone is for this industrial park and the nearby port as well. Millions of dollars have been sunk into the port project alone, and the United States just abandoned it like around 2020-ish.
Oh, so there's just like an abandoned office park somewhere, like in like I'm assuming like outside of Port-au-Prince or something. Um, that's just like a ghost town.
Basically, yeah.
Yeah.
So Anthony Lowenstein, who wrote Disaster Capitalism, Making a Killing Out of Catastrophe, said the neoliberal exploitative economic model currently being imposed on Haiti has failed many times before. The result is that many Haitians are living in a state of despair and daily desperation. So not only did we come in with all this money under USAID to be like, we're gonna fix everything. We didn't fix everything. We tried to instead make Haiti extremely hospitable to American business interests, and we couldn't even do that. We just kind of gave up and walked away. So the US Government Accountability Office came out with an audit of the project in 2013, and they had said that, like, look, in order for the Caracol Industrial Park and the power plant and the port to all work, all of them had to be developed simultaneously because one wouldn't work without another. But the audit found that USAID, who had been specifically in charge of leading the port project, lacked what they called, quote, staff with technical expertise in planning, construction, and oversight of a port.
I like that this is they were doing Doge or whatever.
Yes.
Like they were just like, we got some guys in there. There are most recent college graduates, University of Phoenix. It's gonna be great. Uh like and then they just like send a bunch of like dumbasses who are not like, we are civil engineers with like a lot of training and like know how like technical expertise and also like the resources to do the fucking thing.
So we send USAID with a fuck ton of money, and we're like, yeah, build a port. And USAID's like, got it. They can't fucking build a port. Who knows where all this money actually ends up? And the audit points out that USAID had not actually constructed a port anywhere in the world since the 1970s. They had like 50 years of zero port experience under their belt. And so this audit was kind of like, why are we giving USAID money to ostensibly go build this fucking port? Surely this is not how this project should have been done if it was our business to do it at all. So the audit basically was like, everything USAID has done with $4.5 billion in Haiti has been a total waste of money and a failure. Construction was delayed from the start. The time needed to build the port, originally they were like, we'll do it in 2.5 years. And then once they tried to start, they were like, JK, probably 10 years. And then after that, they were like, JK, no timeline in question, just sometime it might happen. And they said that USAID had, quote, no current projection for when construction of the port may even begin or how long it will take by the time the audit came out in 2013.
Are you telling me that a United States government agency partnered with a bunch of like private companies uh in pursuing a large project experienced project creep and bloat, that
Yeah. Yeah.
eventually
Shocking.
got so out of control that they just abandoned the whole fucking thing?
Yeah, but not before a
No,
bunch of
like, I don't
American businesses made money off of the USA dollars.
I don't even think like at this point, like, is this like you do have to ask the question, like, is this interesting? Because this is just like this is so like status quo, de rigueur, whatever, that it's just like, no, that's just like the government is like a funnel for graft.
Yes, it totally is. And if you've got a business that could theoretically operate in a way that the government needs, even if you can't actually do it, as long as theoretically you could, and you know a guy at the government, your business is just going to get a fuck ton of government money thrown at it, whether you can do the job or not. And so in June of 2015, a USAID feasibility report came out, and the report itself found that, quote, a new port was not viable for a variety of technical, environmental, and economic reasons, end quote. They also said, we don't even have enough money to finish the job. They said USAID funding will be insufficient to cover a majority of projected costs, with an estimated gap of between 117 to 189 million dollars from the 300 million already allocated to the project out of the $4.5 billion total allocated to Haiti for USAID in general. So they're like, also, maybe oopsie on our end. Not only can we not build the port, it turns out nobody actually wants the port because all the private companies that USAID had been trying to lure in with the promise of the port and the industrial park, the feasibility study said, quote, had no interest in supporting the construction of a new port in northern Haiti. So basically, everybody was kind of like, why are you doing this? What is happening? By January of 2019, 9 years after the earthquake, USAID had already spent $2.3 billion in Haiti. Most of it just going directly towards American companies, none of it actually going to Haiti, and a lot of it for projects like the port or the power plant or the business park that never even actually got finished. Less than 3% of the billions of dollars USAID spent in Haiti actually went directly towards Haitian organizations or Haitian firms. And this is according to a research report that was done by CEPR. 55% of the money we know definitely went to American companies located in and around Washington, D.C., because they're buddies and they just gave their buddies government contracts.
Informal relationships.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So the majority of USAID spending in Haiti actually wasn't in Haiti at all, and it just went back to American businesses. So Haiti is really a great case point for when we talk about American aid. American aid in other countries, at best, is an opportunity to exert control and power and influence over those countries' economies. At worst, it's a giant money laundering scheme, just like the art world, David. On topic with our little intro conversation.
I legitimately think, right, like money laundering, we should probably get into it. Like,
You know how to do that? Do you know a guy in DC that I'm not aware of that's not in a hardcore band?
I don't know a guy in DC in a hardcore band. What?
I just
God,
feel like that might be more realistic to find a hardcore guy in DC for our types of people than like a government guy in DC.
I think I could drum someone. I like
We could dress you up and you'd look like a young Republican real easy, I think.
young,
You should go try to
um,
get a job at Heritage now.
young
Yeah,
Madeline,
yeah, 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 yeah,
young,
yeah. Yeah. For
young.
in government, do you know how old our elected officials are? At nearing 40, you'd be on the young end for sure. You'd be a bright
I
new shining face.
I could go to one of Marco Rubio's parties.
Probably. I
That
think if you
that's
just
a
showed up in a suit, someone would talk to you.
this was I was up in Mount Baldy today, and I did have this like moment of like where and like two like sort of libertarian Republican people kept talking to while we were in line to like get seated at a little mountain diner. And I kept being like, why, like, I don't know what it is. Like, why are these people, why do they think that I want to talk to them about like how out of control the liberals are in California? Like, I'm not, that's not, do I look like that's my vibe?
Yeah, the liberals should get more out of control in California is my position.
Right? I mean, I hate Gavin Newsom with a passion, but he is going to be our I think he is like what the Democrats are going to bank on long term.
I think so too. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah,
Like,
it's I think that there's I think if either of the two of us could get in a
no,
sweet sweet government contract, it's you, not me. That's all I'm saying.
well, I have no public presence, so other than this, I guess, so they wouldn't see it coming. Though the
It's a
I
very generic name though. David Roberts. How many people in the United States do you think have that name?
not saying my like full name out in public while we're talking about doing crime,
It's a
Madeline.
generic name. Nobody's going to be able to track you down from that. If I Googled your name right now, I would not be able to find you.
Oh, I was telling my girlfriend I had the unique pleasure. This is completely off topic of showing my girlfriend today the Canary Mission website, like the one that shows all of like the students who like ever went to like a BDS meeting and like has like a list of all of their social media accounts. Uh,
Wow.
and I was like, this is one of the weirdest fucking things. Like, but like I don't know how that relates. I was really excited. Like
Surveillance state. You were thinking about the surveillance state, your presence on the internet. I get it.
I would like I think like we should kill the internet. I
I'm on board. Nuke the
I
internet.
just
Let's go.
I like I don't like it.
Same.
It's making people weird.
It is
Um
making people weird. And you know what? I don't want to say it because it's boomery. And the boomers are always like, it's the kids in their phones. And it's like, no, like the economy is destroyed from late stage capitalism and it's just going to rapidly accelerate whether we like it or not until ultimately it collapses under the weight of its own contradictions. And we are living through final days. And it is hard to live through these final days. But now I'm like, comma, and probably the phones aren't helping.
phones are right, these are interconnected problems.
They might be. It's the opiate of the masses, maybe kind of
But
thing. I don't know. Is that bad?
I
Is it a problematic
like
thought? This is an unexamined, potentially problematic thought, influenced by my own internet experiences.
yeah, it's like I will say being trying to socialize with you while you are having your internet experiences is not always fun because it's just
It's
like
horrible. It's awful. And it's just wild how the internet fosters the ability to be rude and wrong to such an extreme that I've never seen anywhere else. You will
I
see people just so doubled down in incorrect beliefs that are so easy to debunk and just like will never look into them. So anyway, David, I think you were correct to not have a large internet presence, but I do think that we could get you to help launder
I
money
just
through a new
dude,
government
I
affiliated job we create because you're ungoogleable because your name
I
is so generic.
I think that I would like to money launder. I think that it sounds easy from what I'm hearing. It
Oliver
sounds
North could do it. We're at least as smart as that guy.
it sounds like if I were like, hey, I like what's like Caribbean nation that isn't often in the news, like Antigua or something, right? Like it was like I'm gonna open I'm gonna build wells in Antigua. I think they would be like we don't know enough about Antigua to know if that is like a plausible thing you're telling us. Here's a few $1 million.
Give it a shot, see what happens. And then 10 years later, you come back and you're like, it didn't happen. Sorry. Thanks for the millions of dollars, though. Bye.
Project Creep. Also, the Antiguans weren't nice to me about the well building, so they are ungrateful.
I think
I
that's just what you said. And everyone's like, that sounds like them. Yep. And then you're
yeah,
done. And then you've successfully you've grifted millions of dollars from the US government. Yeah.
yeah, that sounds I'm
I think we
okay.
can do this. I think it's possible.
I'm resigning from podcasting. Uh, um uh like if you are I guess there's no one left at USAID, so
There's
if
a few, there's a handful of people left. We're going to do
but
an
that
update at the end of the episode with the most current news we can find about USAID, USAID. I'm going to live Google it at the end of the episode to see what new info has dropped.
I'm just saying that just means that there are so many private grifters out there now who are just like looking to collaborate.
There's an opportunity.
Like right when
There's an
God
opportunity.
closes the door, he opens a fucking window. Okay,
Okay,
so
okay,
we're
okay.
in
So we're
Haiti.
still on Clinton's. We're wrapping up on Haiti. Just Haiti is a great microcosm of exactly how these USAID projects work. The next place we're going to talk about is Peru, and Peru is not going to be an example under the Clinton administration of USAID doing like financial waste. It's going to be an example of something way more sinister. So Alberto Fujimori governed Peru from 1990 to the year 2000, and his health ministers at the time and other government officials engaged in a practice of forced sterilization that ended up having USAID backing. So
Mhm.
the National Catholic Register reported that USAID basically took control of the Peruvian national health system during the time that these forced sterilizations were happening. So basically, Peru's sterilization campaign involved a few different American agencies. USAID was the largest, but it also involved the United Nations Population Fund and the Nippon Fund, which was a Japanese nonprofit. The UN Population Fund, UNFPA, they alone donated $10 million for the forced sterilization campaign. And so when people, when communists and socialists are trying to tell you, like, hey, don't trust the UN, like, hey, don't trust these government agencies, this is why they are using this money and these resources and this reach for evil. So we actually have a quote from one report on this that says, an important document was published by E. Leogen with the title USAID and Involuntary Sterilization in Peru, in which she analyzes the actions made between 1995 and 1997. So, this kind of quote is coming from Carlos Polo, who's the director of the PRI office for Latin America. And he goes on and says, according to her, the internal archives of USAID show that in 1993, the United States basically took charge of the national health system of Peru. The bilateral accord of 1993 that put the United States in such an advantageous position, known as Project 2000, was signed by the Peruvian and American authorities in September of 1993 under the Clinton administration and was effective for 7 years, ending in the year 2000. An examination of this document shows that USAID Peru, the office in Lima of USAID, was in any conceivable form in control of the Peruvian health sector before and during the years that the abuses took part. So basically, as part of a quote unquote aid effort under the Clinton administration in Peru, USAID teamed up with the UN, went into Peru, set up offices, took control of the entire health sector there, and used that as a way to forcefully sterilize Peruvian women.
Now, let me ask you, what was the top line rationale here? Like, if you're like USAID guy and you're like, yeah, like you're on a Tinder date. Let's say you're on a Tinder date, right? And you're like, you know, oh man, I'm going to Lima. No, I'm so cool. Not only am I a man of the world, but I'm also like I'm really like benevolent and I do good for people. And like the UN is involved, so it's like legit. We are going to sterilize some people and like maybe they're not gonna like they might not have a choice,
They don't
but
have
like
a choice. They definitely don't have a choice.
but like here's the thing, and like the woman across from you, it's a heterosexual Tinder date, um is like that doesn't sound nice. Why are you doing that? Are you like, it's because we want to, like, what's like the goody two
Okay.
shoes explanation of this?
I mean, it's eugenics. It's eugenics, basically. They specifically targeted the types of people who demographically they did not want to be in a position to procreate. And one woman who went through this experience talks about what occurred. So her name's Rute Zuniga. Zuniga, sorry, she was 29 years old in 1999 and had just given birth to her fourth child. And health officials that were controlled by USAID came to her door of her house and they were like, oh, you need to come down to the health center. We're going to give you guys some vaccines. So when you see people talk about USAID performing these like life-saving kind of medical treatments in other countries, they're telling her like, we're going to give you vaccines. And she's like, I don't really feel like I need to do that. And they're like, no, you need to. And they force her on a stretcher. And they're like, we're gonna check you out too. Don't worry, you're just gonna get a tiny little cut. And it turns out that the tiny cut was a tubal ligation, a sterilization procedure that closes off your fallopian tubes. And she was like, I only went to school up until the third grade. I didn't speak Spanish super well. I didn't want to get in trouble. And basically, they just took advantage of me. So they were targeting people who had lower educational backgrounds, lower incomes, and already had children. They were
It
basically
sounds
like,
like
we've decided you've had enough.
if if she did not speak Spanish very well, I'm assuming that like she had an indigenous language uh as her first language. Is that
Yes,
explain?
yeah, she
Yeah.
was indigenous. Yes. And, Alberto Fujimori, who had been in charge of Peru at this time and had been working with USAID and allowing the American government and the UN, his main whole deal in the basically decade that he was in power in Peru was fighting communism. He was anti-communist. So of course it makes sense the United States and the UN are going to come step in.
We're 2000. What year are we? We're like 2010.
Where it's 1990 to the year 2000 is what we're looking
Oh,
at. We're
okay,
still
okay.
under the Clintons.
But I'm just like I'm looking at this and I'm like, dude, Francis Fukuyama came out and he was like, right, it's the end of history, unipolar world, no more communism. We don't have to think about that. That seems like right. Fighting communism by like 1995 sounds a little bit like you're wearing MC Hammer pants.
It's a little out of fashion, but this is what I would say. All these government powers still think communism's got a fighting shot in it, obviously, because look at everything that they're willing to do to fight it. So in 1995, Fujimori went to a UN World Conference on Women and was like, "We're gonna do this really intense family planning campaign." And of course, not mentioning the family planning campaign that the UN was also involved in was, yeah, just like forcing sterilization on women. So at the time, the people who were being targeted because 25% of women in the country had more than 4 children and were very, very, very poor. So poverty at the time in Peru was around 68%. So, they were like, look, women are having more kids than they even want to have. There's a lot of maternal mortality because we don't have great hospitals in place. So they're like, we're going to try to give poor women like a shot. But, obviously this is like not about introducing the proper resources to help these poor women, like better access to healthcare, better access to contraceptives or contraceptive, education. No, instead, they did a little bit of this. They did have millions of condoms, birth control pills, and other contraceptive methods provided. But more than that, 280,000 of those tubal ligations, those sterilizations, were performed. And almost from the start, we knew that it was aggressive government sterilization quotas. Women were not consenting to them. And it was particularly targeting poor indigenous women in Peru. And nobody really knew what was going on. And some of those women who had to undergo these forceful sterilizations, they also died because of infections, because conditions were not sanitary or correct when they were having them administered. There was not post-operative care. It was pretty bad. So this is basically what USAID was doing under the guise of providing medical care in Peru under Fujimori.
Okay,
And
so
hmm,
I'm on my Tinder date, and
okay,
I'm
yeah, okay.
no. It's not like that. Listen, like what do you got? You got like an IUD that might be important for us on this date later. But you've got an IUD that was probably really annoying to get in, and like the hormonal stuff can get crazy, right? Like,
Women be crazy. We know women be crazy.
but like, what if you only had to do it once, and it was just forever? So it's just like I'm just providing birth control
Forever.
and
And I'm not
forever.
telling them what I'm doing because it would hurt their silly woman brains if they knew. But it's good for
I,
them. It's
also
good
they're
for
gonna have
them.
so many economic opportunities now. Like at this point, I'm gonna be like, I have to tell you about this guy named Thomas Malthus. Uh, and at this point, the woman's going to be like, you know what? We should just get out of the restaurant now and go back to my place. You are obviously like some sort of saint.
Yeah,
Uh,
you have managed to repackage eugenics to me in a way that sounds good. And
yeah,
I mean, it's eugenics. They're doing eugenics. And we
but
basically Yeah, USAID did eugenics in Peru
Hmm.
against poor indigenous women.
Okay, cool.
So that is some highlights, the little highlight reel of USAID under the Clinton administration. And
Sure.
obviously, what's going to come next, administration wise? Who's next up in the presidential roster?
Uh, uh, W.
W, our first presidential election.
What are
No, no, that was
no?
the second time, wasn't it? It was the second time. Yeah, 2004 was our first presidential election.
Yeah, that
We
was.
didn't get to vote the first time. The first election was 2000.
I'm
So
still looking for, if anyone can find one, a Swift Boat Veterans for Truth, any merch,
what was
right?
that? I don't remember
That
that.
was the we talked about this like I think last time.
Did we? What was it again?
It's like the Kerry people, like the people who were
Oh,
like
yeah.
Kerry. John Kerry lied about his service because he'd been like a Vietnam veteran against the war guy.
Yes.
Uh, and he may have also like killed US soldiers or like been responsible for the death of you, some bullshit like that. But like just to go with my Oliver North t-shirt,
Would be so good.
like because then the guy at like Mount Baldy like the Mount Baldy little cafe or whatever would just be like, this guy gets me. We're gonna talk about going to Scottsdale together. We're gonna party in Scottsdale. No
On a
offense to
boat.
in Scott, yeah.
I think
Uh
people have lakes and boats in Scottsdale, don't they? It's a rich people place. Rich
there's
people
like
love
maybe like an
boats.
artificial lake.
I bet there is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's doable. Okay, so we're in the George W. Bush era, 2001 to 2008. David and I got to vote in the second term that ended up being George W. Bush. David, you voted for George W. Bush famously. Is that correct?
No, so first I was a like a Fat Mike acolyte back in the day.
No effects.
Um,
Yeah, okay. So you
I
didn't
was
vote for George W. Bush. I remembered that wrong. My bad. Sorry.
I rocked against Bush. Uh
Uh-huh.
that was I was really into like and then like talked a lot about how much I love the Democrats, and like the Democratic Party was basically the Green Mohawk of 2004. Uh,
Right. Okay,
that was
so
my
I remembered that wrong, so that's my fault. I'm so sorry.
I had I was like I was rocking the vote somewhat famously.
You were rocking the vote. I do remember you were rocking the vote. I who did I vote for? I was registered Peace and Freedom. Who did they run in 2004?
Someone no, I'm sure they
I'm
did.
gonna look. Let's
Uh,
take a look. Why not? Let's do, the people like it when it's conversational. Let's see who they ran. Leonard Peltier.
he was in prison.
What?
Rocks. I love he's like
I think I voted for Peltier. I think that's who I voted for. Fuck yeah. And everybody in 2024 is like, Madeline didn't vote for Kamala Harris. And I'm like, what?
You voted for Leonard Peltier? Like didn't he just get out of prison like this year or some shit?
Well, let's take a look at what was going on. He's 80 years old. He's Native American activist, a part
Yeah,
of
no,
the Indian movement, right? And he was convicted of murdering 2 FBI agents.
he was like the fuck yeah, Peace and Freedom Party.
Yeah.
You guys are just like cool trolls at that point. Like you're like, he's literally in prison. Like,
but also, it's like everybody was like, get this guy out of prison. Nelson Mandela was like, get him out of prison. Everybody was
yeah,
like, he shouldn't be in prison.
running him for like that would be like the funniest. Like, that's a troll. Like they're being funny.
I think that he would have been a great president. I mean,
I'm sure he would have been spectacular, but running Leonard Peltier for president in 2004.
yeah. I mean, that I stand by that one. The year that I was like, I'm out, Peace and Freedom Party, you fucking
I love
was
that
the
you're like,
Roseanne Barr year. That year I was like, what the fuck is happening? That was troll behavior.
I love that you're
I don't think that's troll behavior. Roseanne Barr is troll behavior.
So I think right there that is benevolent, like the Leonard Peltier. First of all, I find it very amusing that you're like, who did I vote for in 2004? Leonard Peltier. Who's Leonard?
I had to look it up. I forgot. My memory's not great. You know this.
But
you know my memory's not good.
No, I know, but like I find that very, but like there are
I was
not
like, oh, this
all-
is the shootout, the Pine Ridge shootout guy, right? It was
oh
Pine.
yeah, but the I'm just gonna say not all trolls are like Reddit incel gamergate weirdo freaks or whatever. Sometimes it's like, look, we know we're not going to get a peace and freedom president in 2004. So we are going to use the platform as a way of making a very funny joke, which is like, what if we had Leonard Peltier as president?
Don't think it's a joke though. They also ran Angela Davis back in the day. This is what they do. They find, socialist people who are advocating for liberation, and it like raises awareness. I think the thing about like socialist running politicians isn't that you expect to win, it's to like raise awareness about socialism and the platforms associated with it, and also to do like a temperature check for how many people out there are proud to identify as socialists.
I in the Leonard Peltier example, I feel like the thing is it's more about Leonard Peltier in the sense that it's like, dude, we gotta free this guy. Like we gotta get like and like
We
the like
gotta free him, yeah.
this is like so I'm not saying it's a troll like they're like, haha, we're gonna make fun of Leonard Peltier. It's like, oh, this is like a really good example or like a good opportunity to be like, hey, did you guys know this Leonard Peltier guy is in prison? You
Okay,
probably
well, this
right.
unfortunately leads me to say something nice about Joe Biden, which I never want to say anything good about a president.
He pardoned him. Wait, no.
He didn't. No, don't get carried away. He didn't pardon him. He
I don't
commuted
know.
his life sentence to house arrest though on January
Oh, yeah.
18th before
No,
leaving
I
office.
mean the guy like,
So on
but
February 18th, just a few weeks ago, as we're recording this, maybe 3 weeks
uh,
ago, Leonard Peltier officially was able to be released from prison and transferred to home to live out the rest of his sentence at 80 years old on house arrest. So, it's not the biggest act of kindness.
oh, so
Probably should have been
Joe
there.
Biden quit like he he couldn't even pardon him all the way. He just
No.
had to like what a fuck.
What do you think the Democrats are up to? Come on. Of course he's not going to pardon him all the way.
What the fuck do you think like this is the like what where it's just like why what so it's like, oh, like you went like you get to go home but like now you can't go to the grocery store, like what the fuck is like, and it's like to what end, like who's like sitting there being like, wow, it like I would have really hated it had this 80-year-old man just been freed, but I'm happy that he is at home now, like who is like, that's my position.
Yeah, I think it's pretty weird. I think it's whatever. It's weird. So, but yeah, so 2004, basically, I'm voting for the imprisoned indigenous rights activist, clearly. I've
I
been remarkably consistent for most of my life politically.
I'm rocking the vote.
You're rocking the vote, yeah.
I am rock against Bush, punk against Bush. What was
Rock
it?
against Bush.
I am wearing a Fat Records t-shirt.
Probably. And a famous Stars and Straps belt.
That's me.
Uh-huh.
What's Bush doing?
Okay,
well,
so
obviously neither of these guys.
It doesn't matter who David and I voted for, because obviously California went Democrat, but it wasn't enough to pull it off. No, because George W. Bush won. And if you want to understand how fucked American politics are, George W. Bush won because the average American was like, he seems like a guy I could drink a beer with, which is code word for them saying he seems like he has no clue what's going on, and he is also confused most of the time, like me.
First of all, listen, I just saw, I think their tagline is the drunkest band in history.
Yes.
Last night, fabulous. But like, I think they're smarter than George W. Bush.
Definitely.
They don't seem like they seem, but in any case, but also he won because like the Supreme Court was like, you have to stop doing the recount now.
Oh, that's right. I forgot about it. He stole the vote. He literally stole the vote.
You can't like stop this recount. Like, right.
That's right. I have political amnesia at the moment. It's all just a blur of fucked up shit, one thing into another. And now I'm like, oh God, that's right. George W. Bush did steal the vote. And he was so evil and bad. And now we're trying to rehabilitate him like he's cute and cuddly.
Oh, he's been rehabilitated.
It's disgusting. He's a horrible man.
It was also, I think, like it was that like Tom Cruise like precog movie that's the Philip K. Dick novel. I think that they were like
Minority Report?
Minority Report. I think the
Okay.
Minority Report precogs were like 9/11's gonna happen. And do we want Al Gore?
They wanted George W. Bush. I mean, he was a pre-bunk, is what they call that in FBI terms. You got to pre-bunk info before it comes out.
That
Prime
was
the masses to receive the info you want.
they were like, but I think that most people, I don't know, Al Gore at the time seemed stiff and annoying. I think that was in 2000 or whatever.
He was really concerned about climate change, though.
That was later. No one knew
Oh,
that.
was it? Okay, yeah, yeah. See,
That
you
was like
remember this era a lot better than I do.
that was like like second term Bush, first term Obama era, like uh, uh uncomfortable truth or something awful. I don't know, some fucking
Yeah.
truth.
Um,
Inconvenient.
well,
Uh,
so from 2001 to 2004, the first Bush administration, definitely. You and I, David, we were doing the anti-war protests all in Fresno. Even though
yeah,
we weren't old enough to vote yet, we were very active because I remember getting screamed at by a lot of adults in megaphones very often.
that was I've like I look back on that. The best thing that happened is I went to a really awful crust punk show that I was invited to by a bunch of kids who'd organized for a Michael Parenti reading. And
That
the
makes
like
sense.
that was like a where I was just like, oh, okay, like all these like weird butt flap guys really like this Berkeley professor wherever he was teaching. Like, what the
Yeah.
fuck is this? That's my like I feel like that is like a microcosm of being like a like little scumbag kid.
Yeah,
And
in Fresno. And we actually did have a lot of anti-war protests and stuff going on.
that one guy infiltrated Peace Fresno,
That
and
was a
then
big deal. Yeah. A cop infiltrated Peace Fresno, then died in a motorcycle accident.
it was in I think a Michael Moore documentary at some point, which
I think
Michael
so.
Moore is one of the that is like that's one thing that I just on memory hold was like the existence of Michael Moore. I was like, we found like a really annoying guy to like go up to people who like own like car companies or like water plants in Flint or something and just like yell at them and
Yeah.
then with camera crew. And then
Yeah,
we're
yeah,
like,
yeah. Michael Moore was really important during this era. So we're in the George W. Bush era. Basically, what you need to know, yeah, we've got 9/11's happened. Um, you know, there's actually a meme currently on the internet about me that's Madeline Pendleton hit the second tower, which is one of my favorite iterations of people on the internet getting mad at me about just ridiculous made up things and conspiratorial thinking. So, you know, the 9/11 actually did happen. We're going to war with everybody. We got the war on terror. We've decided everybody has weapons of mass destruction, even though they don't. David and I are children going to anti war protests, getting screamed at by adults. And
oh,
then
we were 15.
we were
15 we
children.
yeah, sure. And like the legal definition of the word child.
Yes. Yeah,
Just
we were
saying, we
children.
were
15. We were children.
I feel like to call it like in this particular instance, in this context, 15 I running around doing bizarre things.
Okay, got it. David thinks the age of consent should be reduced to 15, is what I'm hearing.
That's uh it's a part of my platform to join grifters and the US government.
That's
Uh
good. Yeah, add that to the money laundering thing. They'll love that. The libertarians think we should obliterate the age of consent already, I'm pretty sure.
yeah, I'm gonna do that. I'm gonna do like I who like all those like weird guys who are like who come up with like bizarre like I'm a neo-feudalist fascist and then bring up sort of out of nowhere in every public appearance like well really there's a difference between pedophilia and whatever the other one is. I don't do you know what I'm talking about?
I do, and it's like, my guy, if you gotta
If
go
you're
that
doing
hard for it, I don't think maybe it's worth going that hard for. Uh, It's
But
pretty.
so USAID, we've gone very
Okay,
far.
anyway. So this is what's going on in the George W. Bush era. And David and I got to vote for the first time in the second of the elections. George W. Bush won 2 terms, two-term president. So some of the major things going on at the time, and we're just going to do kind of a brief overview of some stuff that was going on under George W. Bush. The most interesting thing I think happening under George W. Bush around this time was in Ukraine. So in 2004, USAID was involved in regime change efforts in Ukraine. So we talked about this earlier. 1991, the USSR collapsed, and the U.S. had been maintaining close kind of ties to Ukraine, trying to foster Ukraine into being more of a European presence, trying to draw Ukraine kind of away from Russian influence in this post-Soviet world. So US policy had focused on helping Ukraine become what they considered to be a quote unquote democratic state, which we all just know means neoliberal free market capitalist state, that was quote more closely integrated into the Europe and Euro-Atlantic structures. This is from American documents about their stated goals with Ukraine.
Get them into NATO. They want to
We wanted Ukraine into NATO, but we couldn't put Ukraine into NATO without violating treaties that we had established with Russia. So in lieu of this, USAID starts funneling massive amounts of money into Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
And by 2004, so much Western money had entered Ukraine that the large, like this really big Ukrainian news outlet called Pravda Ukraine was actually operating out of Washington, D.C. and funded almost entirely just with American money.
I know for a the information channels between like the undersea cable, internet cable or whatever goes directly from Bethesda, Maryland to Kyiv. So that just makes sense. That's just good planning.
That's good planning. So also USAID was funding a lot of money towards like a Ukrainian student group, right? Then there was also the George Soros Open Society Institute, OSI, that funded a bunch of different student groups that were also involved in regime change, who worked with the USAID funded other student groups. So in November 2004, Ukraine has elections, and President George W. Bush sends Senator Richard Lugar as his special envoy into Ukraine to monitor the elections, I guess, or something. So Lugar issues this statement that's like really intense, and it is damning. It's like, hey, President Leonid Kuchma here, his government, I think committed election fraud. And Secretary of State Colin Powell refused to recognize the election results and was like, election fraud? I'm throwing my hands in the air. Absolutely not. And he said, quote, if the Ukrainian government does not act immediately and responsibly, there will be consequences for our relationship, for Ukraine's hopes for a Euro-Atlantic integration, and for individuals responsible for perpetrating fraud, end quote. So basically what we've got going on here is that USAID enters Ukraine, funds a bunch of student opposition groups to drum up anti-government sentiment and back a Western-approved kind of candidate in the presidential elections. That Western-backed candidate in the presidential elections loses, and the United States government is like, we spent so much money on this. Absolutely not. You didn't lose. The elections must be fake, which is super ironic considering, as David just reminded me, George W. Bush's elections were fake. That was fraudulent. Like there was this whole recount thing, and it was just like we had an illegitimate, fraudulent president at the time. So meanwhile, what Colin Powell is really saying here, like, if you don't act immediately and responsibly, Ukraine, we're going to come in and we're going to fuck you up. What he's really saying is a thinly veiled threat that's like, if you don't confirm that we have decided your elections are fraudulent, and if you don't just accept that and say, okay, fine, they were fraudulent, whatever, whether they were or not, we're going to bomb the shit out of you. So that's really what this messaging is.
Bad, like, right, like, what, we're in like 2003, 2004, what
2004.
year are we? 2004. So, right, like, you're like looking at like Iraq currently in flames, right? And you're like, I mean, they will do it. Like they're
not bluffing. We've already been undertaking this quote unquote war on terror. We've been destroying everything. I mean, the war on terror displaced millions of people in multiple different countries. And we are just on a war path around the globe.
And it's like Colin fucking Powell shows up at your, and you're like, it's surprising he didn't just say we had weapons of mass destruction. That seems to work real fucking well.
Yeah.
Like,
What are you going to do? You can't argue with them. So Colin Powell's statement gets read aloud in Maidan Square, right, in Ukraine. And the protesters, the majority of whom were funded by Western backed groups, including USAID, burst into applause. They're like, yeah, that's right. We're going to fucking destroy Ukraine if you don't say this election was fraudulent. So this was considered the Orange Revolution of 2004. Or was this might have been a different revolution. No, maybe after this was the Orange Revolution. I can't remember if this was the name of the Orange Revolution.
this is the Scarlet
This is the
Revolution.
Scarlet Revolution. So there was also an Orange Revolution.
That was a joke. That was
No,
a joke.
okay.
I was
That didn't need
literally
to be a joke because
I
there's
was
so many with
googling
fucked up
it
names.
now, but
Okay. So
I was literally just like the color revolution thing. They presumably at a certain point, like they're like calling up the Pantone people, and they're like, "Dude, what's the color of the year? We're trying to orient this so that it's stylish, so that people get like, so people like it." Uh, eh, Orange Revolution. This is
so it is the Orange Revolution, basically.
yeah, this is the Orange Revolution.
Yeah, this was the Orange Revolution. This was the one. And so foreign NGOs, places like, non-governmental organizations are called, but who are actually affiliated with the US government, and USAID are really the ones who pushed for this basically coup, right? To seize power and put it in the hands of somebody who was more like viable for Western interests. So basically, a lot of money had been funneled towards opposing Leonid Kuchma in this whole thing, which is super, super interesting. And it ended up getting what was Viktor Yanukovych? Do you remember his role in this? How he played
No,
into this?
yeah.
I'm gonna look it up too, because I think that there's something going on with Viktor Yanukovych that is related to. He was the fourth president of Ukraine from 2010 to 2014, is what was up with him. But I feel like he was involved in the Orange Revolution in some way. I'm gonna look him up.
This is thrilling podcasting.
I'm so sorry. Yeah, we're looking things up.
I'm joking. I've both of us on our phones Googling.
Oh, okay, yeah. So this is what it was. So it was Viktor Yushchenko and Viktor Yanukovych, and they were the ones who were running. And the existing government had been the Leonid Kuchma government, I believe. And so, yeah, basically people were saying that everything was rigged by authorities in favor of Yanukovych. That was what was going on.
Got you.
Yeah. So, Yanukovych actually ended up becoming Yushchenko's successor as president of the Ukraine, but that of Ukraine. Sorry, I know you're not supposed to say that until 2010 or in 2010. So this was kind of like the precursor for this. So basically, though, this was like a huge thing that ended up with USAID trying to basically buy the next prime minister or president.
Like, at a certain point, you do have to, like, if you're like USAID and you're like, we did like legitimately spend a crazy amount of money there, and so it is weird that we didn't win this election. So like, right, like your like their point from like their logic is like, we want what we paid for. Like, this is a customer service relationship. Let's just fucking just give us Ukraine, give it to us now.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what it is. Because, Yanukovych had been the one supported by the Leonid Kuchma government. So what it was is that the United States pushed for them to acknowledge Viktor Yushchenko, who was the U.S.-backed people. And then that's in 2010. This is where I was like, I know Yanukovych comes in later. That's what ended up happening. He ended up getting control again. But yeah, it makes sense. Really, we spent a lot of money. I think the total amount of money spent by Western interests completely, not just USAID or not just exactly the foreign governments of like Western governments, but just Western interests in general. I think it was like $150 million spent on trying to influence this election.
I gotta say, that seems relatively modest.
150 million, 15 million, sure, modest. 150 million, that's significant.
Listen, I'm just gonna say, think about the billions of dollars that we have spent, funding the wreckage in Ukraine these days. Think about the billions of dollars we've spent funding the wreckage in Gaza.
Yeah,
I'm just 150 million for a coup.
for a
That's
coup. Yeah.
a bargain.
Yeah. Also, this is a real loose episode. We were really loose with
I'm
this. It's
sorry.
like
I'm
a
just like
combination of Zoom, and I did the research 3 weeks ago, and yeah.
I'm having a great time.
Okay, we're doing great. All right. So
Yeah.
the another thing of note under George W. Bush was Afghanistan. Obviously, Afghanistan heavily involved in our war on terror.
They're gonna liberate women. Uh, that's the Taliban, which I mean is whatever, but like the Taliban is bad, and uh like Gloria Steinem style feminism is going to take over in Afghanistan, and all around Kabul there are going to be Planned Parenthoods and like Seven Sisters satellite campus schools.
Right. Yeah,
Right.
nailed it. Basically nailed it. No. So from 2003 to 2005, the US military was executing a counterinsurgency campaign basically in Afghanistan against the Taliban. They're like, "Oh no, we need to prevent a Taliban resurgence and we need to build support for the coalition and the central government." And USAID was heavily involved in this, right? They were using the same kind of situation. This is why we talked about extensively what happened in Haiti, because I want you guys to have this framework listening to it to understand what it looks like when USAID enters a region to do like reconstruction projects, quote unquote. This is what they did in Afghanistan. So they basically showed up in Afghanistan and they were like, yeah, we're doing a bunch of reconstruction projects. So from 2005 to 2007, there were all of these efforts to try to take the aid projects that were going on in Afghanistan and try to centralize them or have like interagency kind of cooperation in them. None of them quite panned out though. All of these agencies were fighting with each other. Nobody quite had a direct line on what they were supposed to do. And now looking back on this, we understand the war on terror in general, which included this period of us being in Afghanistan, was a massive money suck. Just we were losing money left and right. Nobody could keep track of anything. Literal cash, millions of dollars of cash were just going missing. People were describing backpacks just full of money, like laying around like embassies and random offices. Like interpreters were getting paid with just like stacks of American currency that nobody quite knew where it was coming from. And USAID was part of this whole operation. They were receiving a lot of funding and they were really the big team on the ground who was responsible for implementing these reconstruction efforts that never quite panned out, just like we saw happening with, Haiti. And this money was just getting moved in weird circles and literally getting lost. So I didn't want to get too much into that because it's such a big thing to talk about the war on terror. And we really just want to do like an overview of the key points. Similarly, we'll just touch on Poland for a second.
Hey,
Um,
can I just remind you of one quick, like, enduring image that I remember being repeated over and over and over, which was like some veteran being like, I remember we brought them a soccer ball and they were so grateful. And it was like the soccer ball represented like internet. Do you remember like just like this, like the rhetoric of a guy being like, we went to some village in like the mountains of Afghanistan and we made a soccer field and we brought them a soccer ball.
I don't remember this, but this makes sense because it's like the ping pong diplomacy thing. It's like the United States is constantly trying to, I don't know, act like we're the good guys in all these places. Also, on top of Afghanistan, the USAID was active in Iraq too. Remember that OTI, the Office of Transition Initiatives or whatever? They sent some of the first USAID personnel into Iraq following the 2003 invasion as part of the war on terror. And their strategy, their initiative, their goal in Iraq was specifically to convey, quote, the tangible benefits of the regime change. So, like, we know that part of what was going on in the war of terror and USAID was throwing money around, being reckless with it, opening things up for American private companies to make money, and also, yeah, actively facilitating and initiating regime change and being like, you guys should love this regime change we're doing. Here's some American cash and probably a soccer ball. So
Yeah.
that's like what was going on with the war on terror at the time. And
So
that's
we're
a
in
huge
Poland.
thing. So we'll probably do a full episode about the war on terror at some point. But yeah, that's just an overview. So in Poland, USAID was also involved in Poland's first democratically elected president, Lech Walesa, who basically the West had aligned itself with revolution in Poland, and they used USAID to try to do the same thing, like fund and facilitate a coup in Poland, regime change in Poland. And Walesa had been like, the West is on our side. Everything's going to be fine. Spoiler alert, the West was not. And USAID was the vehicle through which the Bush administration attempted to execute a regime change and coup attempt in Poland. There's also Georgia, similarly. 2003, a Georgian news channel contested the results of a recent election in Georgia. During the vote count, the news station, which was called Rustavi 2, ran a scroll on the screen that compared the official results to exit polling. Now, the exit polling had been funded by Western governments and Western NGOs. So basically, they have the actual tallies of the votes, and then they have Western-backed independent groups saying, no, this is what people told us they voted, though.
Yeah.
And all of this is getting aired on this news station, Rustavi 2. Now, Rustavi 2 itself was funded with USAID money.
Mhm.
So basically, we had USAID going into Georgia under the George W. Bush administration, basically buying a TV station and having a bunch of people be like, hey, we think that maybe the election was fake because our US backed guys said it is. And
Uh-huh.
that's just like absolutely wild. And this is something that continued to pick up steam. There were in the summer of 2003, like a lot of activists were being trained with USAID money. Over 1,000 young people in Georgia were getting money, like student groups from USAID, to try to run with this like coup thing about the elections, contest election results. And this is something that didn't stop like under the George W. Bush administration. By 2021, USAID alone had provided over $1.8 billion to Georgia just for initiatives like this. Just a lot of it
I,
based on regime change attempts.
I gotta say, if you are like a US college student, you gotta be looking at this and being like, wait, so like the best way to not have to take out crazy student loans is to just like be like, we gotta, I'm going to like UC Irvine. I'm gonna start like a USAID student group and be like, hey, we need regime change in Irvine. We got to get rid of that guy, the Irvine government. You could get some money, dude. I'm sorry, become a grifter. Like, there's a lot of money floated. Okay,
There's a lot of money floating around. Yeah. So, okay. Now I know I said this was going to be a two-parter.
are we? We're only on Obama. We're
We're
about to
only
get
up to Obama. How long have we been recording so far?
2 hours.
Two
We're
hours. Ugh.
okay.
It
It's
might have to
I'm
be.
jibber jabber. I am a jibber jabber.
It
I'm
was a real
sorry.
loose episode. We do still have to do Obama, and there's a lot. There's a lot about Cuba. There's a lot
Why
about
don't
Honduras. There's more about Ukraine. Remember how I was like, I remember this Yanukovych guy. He comes back. That's
yeah.
has to do with what happened after the Orange Revolution with the Maidan Revolution in Ukraine. So I did not make that up. My brain is just a little jelly right now. We have to do what's the current status of USAID as well. So
So do
we
you want to
could.
do Obama and current next time? We did Clinton and Bush this time.
Oh my God, we're being so slow. We could push through it really quickly and I could
Okay,
just monologue
let's
about it. Should we just fucking rock it?
I'm gonna shut my damn mouth. I'm gonna put myself on mute. I like
All right, it's a Madeline lecture for the next 30
go
minutes to
for it.
crank through this. All right. So this brings us to the Obama era, 2009 to 2016. And remember that Office of Transitory, initiatives or whatever, which is the highly controversial version or like branch of USAID that is specifically involved in regime change and coup attempts? Well, in 2010, it gets strengthened under Obama. So Clinton had created this 2010 Quadrennial Diplomacy and Development Review under the Obama administration, Hillary Clinton. And under that, OTI's programs were expanded and strengthened, and the State Department pledged to work much more closely with the office. So basically, give them more power, give them more backing. And the review said, quote, we will build upon OTI's business model of executing programming tailored to facilitate transition and promote stability in select crises countries. So promote stability just means promoting whatever government attempts there will be friendliest to American business interests and government interests, even if it's not necessarily what's best for the people there. The overall plan for OTI was overseen by a Clinton deputy and the administrator of USAID. So USAID was super involved in basically all of Hillary Clinton's work as Secretary of State under Obama. And most of the projects were contracted to a group of private aid companies in Washington. So in Cuba, basically, so in Cuba was where we really saw, I think, some of the most interesting stuff that USAID started getting into after they had kind of their reach start to get expanded. So the Associated Press did a lot of reporting on this, what USAID was up to in Cuba under the Obama administration. And it did start as early as October of 2009, even before those measures to strengthen their pull. But we can see that it became more intense over the following years. So basically, USAID created this project where they sent Venezuelan, Costa Rican, and Peruvian young people into Cuba to try to basically instigate a rebellion. And these people would work undercover. Remember, OTI had said that they were going to start to do more CIA type things under USAID, and that's exactly what this is. USAID sent undercover operatives from these other countries into Cuba, had them pose as tourists, and then asked them to travel around the island looking for people that they thought they could turn into political activists on behalf of the American business and government interests. So Cuban authorities noticed this, though, right away. And they were like, hey, random travelers, you seem to have a lot of money. Who is bankrolling this? Who is paying you to be here? Because famously, people from Venezuela and Costa Rica and Peru, young tourists from there, don't usually have this much money. What's going on here? And these people who were paid basically to be spies for the US government, they had this mission to identify potential social change actors, and they were not trained spies doing this. So, they were like, we don't really know how to stand up against this Cuban interrogation. One of the people who was hired to do this was like, yeah, I basically only got a 30-minute seminar on how to evade Cuban intelligence. And there was no safety net if I was caught or questioned. So I really didn't know how to respond to any Cuban authorities kind of questioning how I was here and who was funding it. A Serbian contractor was detained coming into Havana with equipment to help work on this project. And he had a memory stick on him that he was like, oh, this would be like super incriminating. Nobody really looked out for him or what was going on with him. And he ended up leaving Cuba early because he was like, this is a sketchy project. This has not been well planned. This is pretty weird. And then Alan Gross, just a couple weeks after that, who was a US citizen working on another secret USAID program, ended up getting arrested. And he was like, that was a good decision I made because USAID is not good at pretending to be the CIA. Like they are doing a bad job. So in 2011, a Cuban knowingly working with the United States on one of these programs, now after the OTI kind of budget and reach has been expanded, ends up getting detained in Havana. After having this meeting with a creative manager in Miami, and computer equipment had been seized, all with documents linking him to USAID. So there was all these weird covert operations USAID was trying to run in Cuba from 2009 to at least 2011, a little in the future beyond that too, that were messy and complicated and didn't quite make sense. In all, nearly 12 Latin American, like just random people they plucked from different countries, ended up serving in this weird USAID program to try to be basically a low-level spy in Cuba. And they were paid like hardly anything. They were paid like $5 an hour to do this work. So the
I'm going to break in for a moment.
Yeah, what's that?
I'm sorry. The history of like, right, first of all, to be like, oh, they're like bad spies in Cuba. Wow, USAID is like cut rate CIA. When precisely in the CIA's history of working with Cuba have they ever been good at it? Like, right, I'm just gonna like it's like we're gonna do like Marx Brothers style exploding cigars. We're going to make Fidel Castro's beard fall out. We're gonna do the Bay of Pigs and just like send a bunch of the dumbest guys possible on like a mission that basically everyone was like, this is gonna fail immediately, right? Like I'm just saying, like, right, like if someone's like, hey, would you like to work for like a United States backed spy organization trying to infiltrate Cuba? Say no.
They don't, yeah, this is true. We're famously bad at this. So maybe OTI under the USAID kind of program isn't worse than the CIA. Maybe it's just the continuation of our same shenanigans and buffoonery in Cuba.
Just like it's like that, I have public or advocated here for being a shyster in many different ways. This is
Actually, you
one of
have. Yeah, this is true.
this is not one of them.
Do not take the Cuba spy job. The U.S. government.
Bad gig.
It's a bad gig. We don't know what we're doing. So the AP found that USAID and this contractor had been working with, remember the Miami contractor that guy got caught with the stuff from, called Creative Associates International, had continued the program in Cuba even as US officials privately told government contractors to consider suspending travel to Cuba after Alan Gross had been arrested. And Alan Gross remained at the time of the USA or the AP article anyway, still in prison for basically smuggling in sensitive technology into Cuba on that memory stick. So Creative Associates contractors were like, okay, we're not doing that. USAID was like, we're going to keep on doing our program. Sorry. So Creative Associates contractors just started using a front company in Panama with directors in Tortola in the British Virgin Islands and a lawyer in Liechtenstein to head it as like the cover now for continuing these operations. And the contractors would use code names and they'd have encrypted emails and cover stories to start fooling the Cuban authorities. So rather than being like, okay, we're not good at this, we're going to stop, they're like, I think we can fix it. I think we can do better. So
they're like, we're going full John le Carre. We're gonna do that. We're gonna get a banker in Liechtenstein. We're gonna get someone in the British Virgin Islands. We're gonna have like just like rich British guys involved somehow.
Yeah, and they're gonna fix everything. Now, as you might imagine, it didn't fix anything, and it was still just a bumbling mess and a huge waste of money. So AP reported that the collection of USAID missions in Cuba, which were all undertaken over the same period and cost millions of dollars, ultimately failed. So the types of missions, we're going to get into what some of them were, and they are wild. They are some of my like favorite air quotes in that they are just so surreal and bizarre. U.S. attempts at regime change I've ever heard of. It's horrifying. Like we should not be threatening the governments of other sovereign nations. This is wild. But if we're going to do it, these are by far the most shocking and entertaining, I guess, ones we've done. But it's horrifying as well. So
I love it. Like I love Bumbling Spy. I think that is like Bumbling Spy is literally the genre of audiobook I fall asleep to. So
this is right up your alley. So the first thing we kind of mentioned earlier when we were talking about USAID is the HIV clinic. So USAID went into Cuba and created an HIV clinic with an HIV prevention workshop. And memos internally were like, this is not actually about HIV. This is the perfect excuse to push forward our political goals, which were trying to basically incite rebellion in Cuba. So they were like, we're going to use this HIV clinic as a place to try to find people who might be disgruntled with the Cuban government and try to push them into counter-revolutionary activity, basically, on the island. Also, the big one that a lot of people maybe even have heard of, but maybe thought was more the CIA and didn't realize was USAID, is the hip-hop scene infiltration in Cuba.
Yeah, they tried to do a music festival.
They did a music festival.
Oh, yeah.
So USAID basically undermined the local hip hop scene in Cuba by trying to get the country's most notorious rappers to spark anti-government movements with new songs. So they were going to use contractors to recruit a bunch of Cuban musicians for projects disguised as cultural initiatives, but were really aimed at trying to make a bunch of young people hate the Cuban government and rise up and protest against it and stage a coup in favor of having a more American-backed, laissez-faire pro-capitalist policy in place. They also filmed TV shows to help support this initiative, and they ended up setting up a social media network, which we will talk about more in a second. And the whole goal of this was to connect roughly 200 artists and musicians on the island to each other so that they would just maybe start this social movement against the government. Artists also were getting flown to Europe to do concerts and video workshops, but really they were just being groomed as potential activists. Like, look at how awesome Europe is. You guys could be like Europe in Cuba if only your pesky, stupid communist government wasn't getting in the way. And this operation was also conceived of by Creative Associates International, those same people who were like, we're going to get the Liechtenstein Bank, we're going to get all these British guys involved. And they ended up using a team of Serbian music promoters. So if you remember early on, one of these Serbian spies who was like, I'm getting out of here, this is getting fucking weird, he was also part of this Creative Associates International kind of business that was a huge contractor under USAID. So on September 20th of 2009, thousands of Cuban people gathered at Revolution Plaza in Havana for a concert. It was Juanes is the name of the performer. They were from Colombia, and it was Peace Without Borders was the name of this concert, and it was the largest public gathering in Cuba since the visit of Pope John Paul II in 1998. So during this music festival, which is supposed to be completely independent, Juanes was asked to promote the Cuban group Los Aldeanos, which was a group that had been critical of the government in the past and had been approached by that Serbian contractor Rajko Bozic, who ran the USAID operation. Aldo Rodriguez was the frontman for Los Aldeanos, and he ended up getting detained on at least 2 occasions, spending a night in jail related to anti-government activity. So in August of 2010, Los Aldeanos ended up taking the stage at another music event at Rotia, which was one of Cuba's largest independent music festivals that happened without USAID's involvement. So in front of a crowd of about 15,000 people, they critiqued government officials by name, they taunted the police. They had been fully taken in by this USAID project. And within months, a USAID contractor told his handlers that the Cubans had said USAID infiltrated the festival and took over. And so they had to get out of there. So basically, they were caught doing this. And Los Aldeanos, meanwhile, had to move to South Florida because the Cuban government was like, we know you worked with the Americans on this whole project. Like, we're not stupid. Like, we caught people coming into the country. We knew they were doing a music thing. We saw that they had worked with this guy who ended up promoting you and introducing you. And then you got popular because of this. Obviously, you're a paid asset of a foreign government attempting to facilitate regime change here. Like, you're committing treason. So USAID actually had to help relocate this band, Los Aldeanos, to South Florida after they were busted for this failed attempt, basically, at fomenting rebellion. The USAID contractors also had an arts and music festival that they put together by a Cuban singer named Pablo Milanez, who was close to the government, in an attempt to do what they called seeding new ideas into festival organizers. The singer's daughter ended up confirming to AP that government officials had showed her emails before the festival started and warned her that she was associating with unsavory characters. And basically, Cuban officials were like, yeah, we also know USAID is trying to take over this music festival that's being put on by Pablo Milanez, your dad. Like, they're just all involved in this Cuban hip hop music scene. Like, they were involved in like at least 3 different festivals, all these different artists. So this is like a really bizarre one that happened. It obviously wasn't successful. But another interesting component of this was how they try to get everybody to go out to these music festivals and support these bands that they had propped up, like Los Aldeanos. And one of the ways they did it, which we talked about, was when they created a fake social media site. And this was USAID who did this as well. So they also created, to go along with this plan, a fake Twitter basically called Zunzuneo, which is slang for a Cuban hummingbird's tweet. So it's like Twitter, but for Cuba. And they launched it in 2009, shortly after the arrest in Cuba of that contractor, Alan Gross. So he had been imprisoned right after traveling repeatedly to the country on USAID missions to expand internet access using sensitive technology that only government officials would use. So he was caught, he was put in prison. And USAID, meanwhile, continued with this plan that Alan Gross had been working on, and they launched Zunzineo, this fake Twitter, with the goal of basically using it to help incite the rebellion. And the site was a communications network. It was, obviously created with the goal of undermining the communist government there in Cuba. But to do that, they had to build it with a bunch of secret shell companies and finance it through foreign banks. So it didn't look like USAID had just made it. And it lasted for 2 years, and it actually ended up having tens of thousands of subscribers and being pretty popular on the island. So first they had to build a Cuban audience, mostly young people. Then the plan was to use the app to try to push them into anti-government thinking, which, if that sounds far-fetched, think about the way our social media algorithms work today. Think about how people can fall down an alt-right pipeline on YouTube, for example. So hundreds of thousands of people in Cuba had started suddenly using mobile phones for the first time. They had smartphones, and Cuban people could text message, it would cost a little money, but they could still do it. So in mid 2009, Noy Villalobos, who was a manager with Creative Associates, that firm that had been contracted by USAID to do all these Cuban projects, they also had worked in the 90s with USAID on a program to eradicate drug crops, started an IM chat basically with her little brother in Nicaragua, and was like, hey, I've got this work project I'm trying to take on. Can you help me? And this was the birth of basically the Cuban Twitter. So they also had somebody involved named Mario Bernheim, who was in his mid 20s and was like a tech kind of guy who was a computer whiz. So Villalobos was talking to her brother and was like, hey, this is very confidential, but what could you do if you had all the cell phone numbers of a particular country? Could you send bulk text messages to them without the government knowing? Like, could you encrypt it or something? And she basically wanted to just have a direct line to regular Cubans through text messaging on their phone. Most didn't have a lot of outside news access because the Cuban government had been trying to protect its citizens basically from American propaganda attempts. And we talk a little bit about that in the USAGM episodes about radio and TV Marti, for example. They had a legitimate reason for trying to isolate the Cuban people away from American propaganda. And so USAID was involved in trying to break through that. So the government was like, we have to control for this, and a communications minister had referred to it as communication and technology as a wild colt that should be tamed because of the potential to basically destabilize the region. So Bernheim told his sister, um, that basically like, look, we could figure out a way to send these instant texts to hundreds of thousands of Cubans for cheap, but it can't be encrypted. That's going to be too complicated. We won't be able to hide the messages from the Cuban government. But we could disguise who was sending the text by constantly switching the countries that the messages were coming from. So Villalobos was like, we could rotate it from different countries and say one message is from Nicaragua, another one's from Spain, another one's from Mexico. And he's like, yeah, we could do that. So I would need to set up mirrors around the world, is basically what he says, uh, meaning the same computer running the same platform with the same phone. And he's like, it's not a problem though. So Creative Industries, that group, that contractor ends up hiring Bernheim as a subcontractor, reporting directly to his sister. And they both would later confirm their involvement in this project. They're like, yes, we did this. This is what we did. And they also got a Cuban engineer to secure the phone list of everybody's phone numbers. And they ended up figuring out how to message everybody without detection. But they were like, we could probably do even better than this. So Creative Associates was the one that thought about using the list to create a social networking system. And this they thought would be marketed mostly to young Cubans who USAID saw as the most open to being influenced for political change, for regime change. So USAID proposed this in a document and they said we should gradually increase the risk and we should try to use smart mobs in critical opportunistic situations and not at the detriment of our core platform-based network. So they built a companion website to the text service so Cubans could subscribe to the website, give feedback, and send their own text messages for free. And they wanted to make it look like a real business. They had fake advertisements like on there with mock ads to make it look like a real commercial enterprise. And USAID staff pointed out that text messaging had mobilized smart mobs and political uprisings in Moldova and the Philippines in the past, so that's why they thought this would be really effective. In Iran, USAID also noted that social media's role following the disputed election of President Mahmoud, Ahmadinejad. I'm so bad at pronunciation.
Yeah. Do you not remember this? Do you not remember all of the Ahmadinejad stuff around this era that was like, there's a contested election and there was like,
I remember. I just can't pronounce words.
You can just like, you can like, even at the time I was like I was like not like an especially like, well, I'm not an especially knowledgeable about foreign policy things now, but like it was like, oh, it kind of seems like the people who are foaming at the mouth for this shit in American like commentary are some of the worst assholes in the world. So I'm just gonna say that this is probably stupid and bad, and I can like not pay attention to it.
Yeah. Okay. So my thing is, I read news things and like I don't like listen to a lot. It's hard for me to like hear things when they're being spoken. So this is why I don't know how to pronounce any words, basically. So they were like, look, okay, so in Iran, we just saw that this was a huge implemented tool to control foreign policy, like information control, text messaging, social media, whatever, as well. So USAID was like, look, there is a basis for this, and our strategic objective in Cuba is going to be to, quote, push it out of a stalemate through tactical and temporary initiatives and get the transition process going again towards democratic change. Read regime change coup attempt. So USAID ends up dividing Cuban society into 5 segments depending on how loyal they thought they were to the government. On one side sat the democratic movement, which they called still largely irrelevant, and the other end was the hardcore system supporters. And they actually used like some fucked up language to do this. They called them the Talibanes, which was a derogatory comparison to like Afghan and Pakistani extremists.
Taliban, the
Yeah.
Taliban. It's the
Yeah,
Taliban.
Taliban. But they were like
They're
Talibanes. Yeah. Like
doing
super fucked up and racist.
like fake Spanish Taliban.
Yeah, fake Spanish Taliban is what they called it. Yeah. So they were like, we're going to try to target these people we think are the most flexible out of these groups. So the users of this social media website obviously had no idea that it was a US agency with State Department ties, that it was USAID. They didn't know American contractors were gathering personal data about them while they used it. And they definitely didn't know that these American contractors were trying to push them into basically doing a rebellion and overthrowing the government. The team thought that that 2009 concert would be a great opportunity, though, to test the political power of the social media site that they'd created. So, leading up to the thing, the concert, basically, they used the phone list and they sent out 500,000 text messages and what they called blasts to test what the Cuban government would do. So they hired a Havana-born artist based in Chile named Alan Lauzon Falcon to write these Cuban-style messages. So some were kind of political, some were funny, some were more pointed and direct. One asked respondents whether they thought 2 popular local music acts out of favor with the government should end up going on stage with Juanes. And 100,000 people responded, not realizing that the poll was being used to gather critical intelligence. There's also Paula Cambronero, who was a researcher for Mobile Accord, who started building this huge database about the Cuban subscribers, which included their gender, their age, and their receptiveness to the messaging, as well as their political tendencies. So USA thought that these demographics on dissent basically could help them target their Cuba programs better and maximize their possibilities to try to basically use these platforms they created to stage the coup. And Cambronero concluded that the team had to be super careful with this. She wrote in a report, messages with a humorous connotation should not contain a strong political tendency so as not to create animosity in the recipients. NBC later reported on this and said details uncovered by the AP appear to muddy the U.S. Agency for International Development's longstanding claims that it does not conduct covert actions and could undermine the agency's mission to deliver aid to the world's poor and vulnerable, an effort that requires the trust and cooperation of foreign governments. So basically, USAID at the time was still denying that they were involved in regime change or coup attempts. But them and their contractors were going to huge efforts to conceal their ties to the project or the US government's ties to the project. They set up front companies in Spain, in the Cayman Islands. They were trying to hide money trails. They recruited CEOs without telling them that they were working for the US government. One of the project's creators, Mobile Accord, in a 2010 memo, said there will be absolutely no mention of United States government involvement. This is absolutely crucial for the long-term success of the service and to ensure the success of the mission. Carlos Sanchez Almeida, who was a lawyer specializing in European data protection law, said it appeared that the U.S. program violated Spanish privacy laws because Zunzuneo illegally gathered personal data from the phone list and sent unsolicited emails using a Spanish platform. They estimated $1.6 million spent on Zunzuneo was publicly earmarked for a project in Pakistan. So all the money that USAID is earmarking to go different ways, we know they're not actually sending to those locations. They're just putting it wherever they want. And documents don't actually show exactly how money does get allocated in the end. So for 2 years, Zunzuneo grew. It reached 40,000 subscribers at least. And Cuban officials tried to trace the text messages to figure out who was sending them. They tried to break into the Zunzuneo system, but they weren't really able to. USAID also was like, we should reach out to Jack Dorsey, co-founder of Twitter, to try to talk about the project. And Dorsey did end up meeting with a State Department officer who worked on the social media projects with USAID named Suzanne Hall, but ended up declining to get involved. USAID ended up telling the AP that Zunzuneo stopped working just one day in September 2012 because the government grant that had been supporting it ended. And that was kind of it.
First of all, I love that like the USAID policy here is basically we're going to do spam text messages. That's going to like that's cool. That's how we do revolutions or whatever.
Yeah.
Also, them like getting involved with Jack Dorsey's very like he's the beardo guy, right? Who's like kind of a weird libertarian.
Yeah, he's the guy with the huge beard. Exactly.
like, and it like you just it does it. The energy is yakety sax. It's yakety sax energy.
It
Uh,
really is. It always is like that, though.
which is, that's cool. I like British comedy. This is good for me.
I
Okay,
mean,
so
it's comedic. Okay, so we're getting into Honduras, and then we're going to talk about Honduras. We're going to do a little comeback on Afghanistan. We're going to do a tiny, tiny bit about the Biden era, and then we're going to get current. And it's not going to take that much longer. The longest section we have left is Honduras, and that is still Honduras under the Obama administration. So it's a long episode, guys. Sorry. And we're going to talk about Ukraine a little bit again. So with Honduras, we basically are seeing a staging ground for one of the largest deployments of U.S. special operations outside of the Middle East, as we call it at the time. And a U.S. sanctioned military coup happens in Honduras under, obviously, the Obama administration. So, U.S. program has been going on to support this conservative government of Pepe Lobo and scrub the image of this super right wing gnarly government for these human rights abuses that it had been accused of, for this political repression, for all of this violent stuff that the regime had been doing to its citizens. The United States was like, no, this is our guy. We need to support him, and we need to keep it quiet about all the bad shit that's been happening. So he had ended up coming to power in 2009 after the Honduran military ousted the elected president who had been in charge back then, named Jose Manuel Zelaya, in a coup that was widely condemned in Central America. But then the United States was like, heck yeah, we love it. So Honduras, after this, descended into social and political chaos, and USAID came on the scene, spending over $26 million at different programs designed to encourage anti-violence alliances between Honduran community groups and local police and security forces. So basically, the United States government backed a coup. The people there were like, we hate this. And then we sent USAID in with $26 million to be like, don't hate it. You love the police and the military. Be cool, man. Which is just wild. So this program was called Honduras Convive, and it had been created specifically by OTI, the Office of Transition Initiatives under USAID, right? So they ended up outsourcing this project again to Creative Associates International, the same people who had done all the Cuba stuff. And they also had worked with OTI on projects in Afghanistan and Yemen and Libya too. So the objective of this thing they created, Honduras Convive, USAID blatantly explained what they thought it should do on their website. And they said it was to disrupt the systems, perceptions, and behaviors that support violence by building alliances between the communities and the state, especially the police and security forces. So they were really trying to discourage basically the Hondurans from taking back their government from American control. Contractor documents about this program showed that it was based in part on communication strategies to win the hearts and minds of people in Honduras. And it's the same kind of strategies that were developed during the counterinsurgency phase of the US wars in Iraq and Afghanistan during like the war on terror. And all of these OTI officials and contractors, remember, operating under USAID, were overseeing the project, and they came specifically to Honduras from Afghanistan, where they were managing the civilian nation building side of the war. And this included people like Miguel Rayabold, who was OTI's country representative in Honduras, who previously had been representing OTI in Afghanistan. A key part of the project was also subcontracted to a company that was owned by somebody named David Kilcullen, who was a senior counterinsurgency advisor in both Iraq and Afghanistan as well. And Kilcullen's research methodology was built to provide what they called a manageable method for assessing counterinsurgency campaigns that can be replicated and customized in other insecure environments. So this is really like statecraft tech subcontracting, which is wild to think about.
I
Now,
like the idea that they're like, we got to get like a form.
yeah,
It's like we need to like do like a subscription service for your coup where you can just like plug and play whatever regime change you happen to need. Because
yes.
look, they're doing it like that. This is capitalism at its best. It is making things more efficient. It is improving it is doing optimization. It's cool. I love it. They're
Yeah,
like,
they're really trying to do this. So that's what they're trying to do. Definitely, they're trying to like, yeah, plug and play it. Totally, that's what it is exactly. So in 2012, they're trying to formulate this operation for how they're going to do this Convive thing, And meanwhile, repression and violence is just widespread for Hondurans. Like, they are not doing great. So if you want to talk about what they were experiencing, that the United States was trying to sweep under the rug and be like, don't resist, do not fight back, the United States loves you. We can go to UC Santa Cruz, actually, historian Dana Frank, who was talking about what was going on in January of 2012 for the New York Times, saying more than 300 people had been killed by state security forces since the coup. And that was according to a human rights organization called COFDA at the time. Now, by 2016, the situation had not resolved. A renowned environmental activist named Berta Caceres was murdered in her home by unknown gunmen. And 2 weeks later, Nelson Garcia, a member of the Civic Council of Popular and Indigenous Organizations of Honduras, which had been co-founded by Caceres, was shot to death. So then thousands of Hondurans started protesting, and they were like, this is a culture of repression and impunity linked to the Honduran government's support for corporate interests, and the corporate interests obviously being tied to the United States. And all of these programs the United States at the time was trying to run under Honduras, they were not going unnoticed. Hondurans were looking at them. And everybody around the world was starting to kind of, criticize Hillary Clinton, Secretary of State then, covert support for the 2009 coup when she had been in that position. And her own autobiography, Hard Choices, she talks about this. She talks about what she did here and how she kind of moved in response to this Honduras situation. And it talks about how she used her power of Secretary of State to deflect criticism of the coup and shift U.S. backing to this new government that was going to be better and more favorable to U.S. interests. She wrote, "We strategized on a plan to restore order in Honduras and ensure that free and fair elections could be held quickly and legitimately, which would render the question of Zelaya moot." Now, in 2014, 2 years before she was murdered, Caceres condemned Clinton's statements about the coup, saying, quote, "This demonstrates the meddling of North Americans in our country." And she said that Clinton recognized that they didn't permit Mel Zelaya's return to the presidency, even though we warned this was going to be very dangerous and that it would permit a barbarity. Adrian Pine, who's an assistant professor of anthropology at American University, basically spent the 2013 to 2014 school year teaching at the National Autonomous University of Honduras and said, "This was all about erasing memories of the coup and the structural causes of violence. It's related to the complete absence of participatory democracy in Honduras, in which the United States is deeply complicit." So basically what they were trying to do is be like, not only did you not fight back, whatever you think happened didn't. And if you talk about it, you're going to get killed. So Alex Main, who works on U.S. policy in Central America at the Center for Economic and Policy Research, said with the coup, then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton had a real opportunity to do the right thing and shift U.S. policy to respect democratic processes, but she completely messed it up. I actually read somewhere that she ended up editing that section out of her book for a future release because people were so mad about it. On March 16th, 2016, 730 scholars organized by the Council on Hemispheric Affairs signed a letter urging the State Department to demand human rights accountability in its dealings with Honduras. And the letter said, "We are deeply concerned that the U.S. government condones and supports the current Honduran government by sending financial and technical support to strengthen the Honduran military and police, institutions that have been responsible for human rights violations since the coup of 2009. That same week, 23 members of Congress and the AFL-CIO called on Secretary of State John Kerry to address the violence in Honduras that was directed against trade unionists and human rights defenders. And on March 14th of 2016, activists with School of the Americas Watch, which opposes School of the Americas, which we have a whole episode about that as well. Obviously many Honduran and Central American military leaders were trained. They raised a banner in front of USAID's headquarters in Washington that read, "Stop funding murder in Honduras." So Lawrence Wilkerson, who's the former deputy to Secretary of State Colin Powell, said, "I've been pretty much appalled by U.S. policy with respect to Honduras. If I could sum it up for what it's been for so many years, that's protecting all the criminals in power, basically for U.S. commercial interests." And that, to me, also is a perfect summary of what USAID is used for. So we're going to go back to talk about Ukraine just a little bit, and then we're going to do a tiny recap of Afghanistan, and that's going to kind of wrap up the Obama era. And everything else after this is going to be smooth sailing, just wrapping up the episode. I know it's a long one. Sorry, everybody. So back to Ukraine. In 2014, some opportunistic far-right extremists toppled the government in Ukraine during the Maidan Revolution. And President Viktor Yanukovych had been back. In 2010, he had become president again after rebuilding his reputation following the Orange Revolution, which we talked about earlier. But he ended up, during this kind of second coup, the Maidan Revolution, fleeing to Russia, fearing for his life. So he basically had been criticized for corruption or authoritarianism, for being too friendly to Moscow, and Moscow had kind of backed him in the previous election. So for 4 years, he had been hedging his bets, so to speak. He had pleased his base, right? Because he had done a lot of cultural measures, like he talked about unity and cooperation with Moscow in key industries. He also made steps to make Russian an official language. He rejected NATO membership. He reversed his pro Western predecessors' move to glorify Nazi collaborators as national heroes in school curriculum. They're happening in Ukraine. But his ability to hedge his bets and kind of stride this American versus Russian line ran into trouble when it came to this oil deal. So, trouble with oil negotiations had pushed him instead further into Western involvement with Europe, and he ended up kind of campaigning towards EU membership as a result of it. The West, in turn, pushed Ukraine towards an IMF loan that would put the country in a chokehold. And we talk about the IMF. We have a whole episode about that if you guys want to listen as well. They're not great, though. Suffice it to say, they are super neoliberal, pro capitalist, like exploitative loans that come along with these terms that mean you have to practice this financial extreme austerity under this economic model that Milton Friedman kind of pioneered that we know does not work and destroys countries. So this loan was bad. And Moscow was like, we see you have a bad loan. We're going to bail you out. We're going to get you a better loan. And this led him to renege on the EU deal and instead align again closer to Russia. So this pissed everybody off and confused everyone. And the United States was like, we need to isolate Russia. And we need to do that by supporting all of these other places that had been part of the Soviet Union and no longer were into European kind of institutions. And Moscow was like, we see what you're doing. Like, this is an offensive to us. And Ukraine, meanwhile, was really in the middle of it. They had been starkly divided. There was a more European friendly West, there was a more Russia friendly East. And the Maidan protests led to the more European friendly camp basically yelling, Ukraine is Europe, and this is treason that you did this deal with Moscow. And this kind of prompted this whole situation. They didn't have majority support. The Ukrainian public, remember, was split along regional and sociocultural lines. And the Western regions backed the protests, obviously, but the Russian speaking Eastern regions didn't. And meanwhile, the Ukrainian far right Nazis began escalating the protests to these really violent levels. Now, a systemic analysis of more than 3,000 Maidan protesters found that members of the far right Svoboda party, whose leader once complained Ukraine was run by a Muscovite Jewish mafia, and which also includes a politician who admires Joseph Goebbels, were the most active agents in these protests. So, Andriy Parubay, the unofficial commander of Maidan, founded the Social National Party of Ukraine, super Nazi influenced, obviously, that later became Svoboda. They were also, these right-wing Nazi extremists, more likely to take part in violent actions than any group except for one, which was something called Right Sector, which was a collection of far-right kind of, I don't know, political agents that traced their lineage straight back to Nazi collaborators who had endorsed genocide. So you got Svoboda, who's the most active. You also have Right Sector, who's the most active in this situation as well. Both can be tied to Nazi politics. And by January of 2014, even NBC was admitting that, quote, right-wing militia type toughs are now one of the strongest factions leading Ukraine's protests. So Ukrainian scholar Irina Solonenko wrote about this in 2015 and said external actors have always played an important role in shaping and supporting civil society in Ukraine. And she's talking about the EU and the United States. She's talking about the National Endowment for Democracy. And she's talking about USAID, whose Kiev headquarters were in the same compound as the US Embassy. Now, 2 months before the Maidan protest broke out, the National Endowment for Democracy's president at the time, pointing to Yanukovych's European outreach, said the opportunities are considerable and there are important ways Washington could help. And National Endowment for Democracy is obviously the CIA's NGO, which we have a whole episode series about as well. So in practice, this looked like funding a bunch of groups like that could maybe be super right wing. Like one group, for example, they funded was New Citizen, which the Financial Times reported played a big role in getting the protests up and running. and they had been led by a pro-EU opposition figure. Journalist Mark Amos discovered that the organization had received hundreds of thousands of dollars from U.S. quote unquote democracy promotion initiatives, just like pro-capitalist anti-commie shit. When these protests broke out, John McCain, senator, and Chris Murphy met with Svoboda's fascist leader, and they like stood next to him, like right next to each other as they announced their support to these Nazi protesters, basically. So they stood next to these Nazi, like shoulder to shoulder, and were like, "Yeah, we love these Nazis." And U.S. Assistant Secretary of State of Victoria.
Clip that.
You're really trying to get me ultra canceled.
This is what you shouted while you were flying the third plane
into the Twin Towers.
The Twin Towers.
Yeah, we love these Nazis. So
Okay.
when protests broke out, right, this is all going on. Meanwhile, Victoria Nuland, who was U.S. Assistant Secretary of State, went to the protest and handed out sandwiches to everybody there alongside John McCain.
Okay, wait, but what kind of sandwiches?
That's a good question, actually. We should look that up. I'm not sure.
I feel like I'm like trying to like get you, I'm trying to get you ultra canceled, but I'm also trying to get you like away from the material that gets, because I'm just going to say, as a little piece of intervention here, as we're rounding the final lap, I think if you made your internet presence like an entirely sandwich-based content, people would, like, I think people love a sandwich.
I am vegan though. It'd have to be all vegan sandwiches. People hate vegans.
I tried that cashew cream cheese stuff.
Yeah.
I have a review. This, and then I'm gonna let you just like speed run the end of it.
Okay, we're almost through it. Yeah.
It's like too liquidy.
Okay, did you try it at my house when you dog sat while I was out of town?
No, the stuff at the place in Highland Park.
Oh yeah. Too liquidy?
Like it's like gloopy.
Huh.
Like, it should be like pretty solid.
Yeah, it should be pretty solid. I can't picture it, but I also haven't had real cream cheese in probably 20 years at this point, so I'm not sure.
Okay, I'm gonna let you speed run the end of
it. Okay. So Victoria Nuland handing out sandwiches, and then we end up getting a leaked phone call between her and the U.S. ambassador to Ukraine that basically reveals them conspiring together to build the post-Maidan revolution government. And Nuland is like, Yats is the guy who's got the economic experience, talking about opposition leader Arseny Yatsenyuk, who had been super receptive to Western influence. And guess what? He ended up becoming prime minister in the post-Maidan interim government. So the only other recap that I think we should note in talking about the Obama era is in Afghanistan. So we know that USAID spent nearly $2.4 billion in Afghanistan from 2002 to 2017. $1.5 billion of that was spent between 2009 and 2011. And that's when over 50,000 troops were brought in to quote unquote clear insurgents from different areas and districts, with hundreds of civilians who were supposed to implement new USAID programs to hold and build these areas. So USAID and the Department of Defense ended up kind of doing what they do best and using all of these programs and creating new ones to try to bolster this activity. But again, this still goes hand in hand with what we know happened during the War on Terror, where obviously these resources were misallocated and misspent and largely just went missing. So that gets us through the Obama era. And that kind of brings us, there's some Trump stuff in there. And there's a little bit of Biden stuff in here. The Trump and Biden stuff isn't super interesting, I have to say. The most interesting thing that happened, maybe that I found, is in 2021, USAID published what they called a disinformation primer, and that urged greater censorship by social media platforms, as well as something called pre-bunking. So pre-bunking is a psychological technique to program people to reject information that the government doesn't like without even thinking about it. And so this idea is like, let's say something's going to come out that the government did. Like, let's say, for example, it's going to come out that Senator John McCain was standing arm in arm next to Nazis in Ukraine, being like, I love these guys, great rebellion, love it. And you're like, oh shit, this is going to break, that these guys are Nazis. You might try to pre-bunk the story by first coming forward and being like, all sorts of conspiracy theorists on the internet have been trying to say that all Ukrainians are Nazis. Can you believe that? And then you would try to push that story forward. So by the time the news dropped that like John McCain was standing arm in arm with some Nazis in Ukraine, you would be like, well, I know that's not true because I heard that all these conspiracy theorists are just trying to paint all Ukrainians as Nazis. And that would be an example of a pre-bunking technique. So USAID published this in 2021, this whole disinformation primer about how to control information flow, especially on social media platforms. And the FBI and Aspen Institute had both used pre-bunking as a disinformation tool in the summer of 2020 to make the top censors at social media platforms and mainstream journalists believe that a future release of information relating to Hunter Biden would be the result of a Russian hack and leak operation. So this is something our government uses a lot. And we know this is a tool that USAID has been using in trying to basically stage coups and rebellions in other countries. Another thing that is kind of interesting is that Joe Biden's USAID head Samantha Powers traveled to Hungary in 2023 to try to strengthen democratic institutions, which again just means do a bunch of pro-capitalist Western neoliberal shit. So that'll be interesting for us to keep our eyes on in the future. And we also know that USAID continued to spend money under the Biden era in Georgia, $41.7 million in recent years, to fund initiatives from opposition media to USAID branded like Independence Day decorations, just like weird, sinister shit. So that's kind of like getting us up to 2025. And that's where we're talking about how obviously Donald Trump wants to cut USAID.
I mean, so my understand, like, just like from like paying attention to basically my little like watch Democracy Now with my morning coffee thing, uh, is that it's like a concentration of like the role of projection of US power. It's not like, whoa, we're really taking a step back from like how we project, or from like projecting US power internationally. It's more about like what institutions are going to be the instruments of US power projection, and
Yes.
US
That's totally it. It's like this shit's not going to stop happening. Trump is just mad at USAID in particular as the institution currently doing it. And we're going to talk about maybe why.
I mean, some of the there might be is the phrase Hunter Biden's laptop going to appear at all in this?
No, we already talked about Hunter Biden's laptop.
I'm just saying that might be a reason.
Okay, so look, here's the thing. USAID has long been the enemy of the political left, but not many people would expect it to be the enemy of the political far right, too. So this means that we're in this position where everybody basically hates USAID except for Democrats specifically, which is pretty weird. So AP says, conservative Republicans have long sought to roll back USAID status as an independent agency, while Democrats traditionally back its status as an independent agency. So Republicans have always been like, this thing has too much power. Like you were saying, David, it's like, we're not mad at what it's doing, but it can't just be doing this on its own, free of checks and balances. And Democrats, meanwhile, have been like, shut up, let it do its thing, it's cooking. So Trump and Musk obviously recently have aggressively targeted USAID, but by doing really inaccurate and weird fake lines about it being a hotbed of Marxism, despite it being founded and used literally to fight Marxism. And Democrats are so mad about this. Like Representative Jamie Raskin, who's a Democrat from Maryland, said on the picket line, Congress created USAID for the American people, which makes no
love, by the way, that the Democratic Party is like, you know what? We found a picket line we can fully get behind. The USAID picket. That
yes, this is wild.
Like, where it's like, wait, where were you? Like, you guys did not seem to care about like very many picket lines over the last few years.
No.
But this one.
Yeah, and they don't care about Republicans rolling back human rights kind of protections. They don't care about maybe staging a protest and not confirming Trump's nominees for key positions. No. They're not going to deal with any of that. But the USAID thing, they're like, do not take our precious coup generator. We need that. We're generating coups. So meanwhile, Senator Chris Van Hollen of Maryland is calling it an illegal power grab, says it's a corrupt abuse of power that's going on to try to, cut USAID. The AP reported that Democrats said court challenges already are in the works. They're pledging to try to block approval of Trump's State Department nominations until the shutdown is reversed, which is so funny because it's like you could block them, period, and you are only choosing to do it to try to leverage USAID coming back. Like, forget
So
about trans people, forget about black people, forget about DEI. Like, you don't care about any of that shit. You just care about your precious USAID, which is so just like on par for the Democratic Party and what they're up to.
I
It's
do think
shocking.
mention it, or like there a phrase should be just like we're just gonna put it into the ether, or I will be, which is the theory of the unitary executive,
Yeah.
right? That this is
Heritage
that.
Foundation stuff.
Yeah, where it's like, oh no, they would like to have like U.S. power projection like consolidated under like the State Department,
Yeah, they
right?
want everything under the president. That's really all it is. Meanwhile, Democratic Senator Chris Murphy said this is a constitutional crisis we're in today, as though USAID is constitutionally granted. He said it because he doesn't think, this is like been the basis for the legal challenges, is that they don't think that the president has the power to dismantle government agencies. But also the way it's worded, it does make it sound like USAID is guaranteed in our Constitution
Which
somehow.
I'm
But
going to debunk that now. Uh, a lot of people are saying that uh, Thomas Jefferson didn't found U.S. I'm very tired. My
yeah,
throat's
no, it's been a long one. Okay. Senator Brian Schatz, the Democrat from Hawaii, said USAID is not just about saving other countries from starvation and disease. He's right. That's not what it's about. But he said there is a reason that USAID is an arm of foreign American diplomacy, and it is because we understand that a stable world means a stable America, which is just so sinister when you hear what USAID has been up to try to preserve quote unquote stability for American business interests. So on February 3rd, Marco Rubio told reporters in San Salvador that he was the acting administrator of USAID, but delegated the authority to someone else. In a lawmaker written letter that the Associated Press obtained, Rubio designated Peter Morocco, a political appointee whose short stint at USAID in the first Trump administration basically came with a bunch of like protests from USAID staff for pushing program cuts. On February 13th, Michael Schellenberger testified for a hearing on eliminating waste by the foreign aid bureaucracy before the Committee on Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs. And I think this guy actually gives us the greatest insight into what the Trump administration is thinking about USAID. He is kooky. He is a right wing nut. Um, but his testimony does kind of showcase why Donald Trump appears to be at odds with USAID specifically. So, a Newsmax press release came out on Thursday, February 2025. Thursday, February, I didn't even write it down, 20th maybe? Yeah, February 20th. Oh, no, the 13th. I think this is the 13th. Yeah. So, basically, this press release is so kooky. And it says the United States Agency for International Development and the CIA funded the 2019 impeachment effort against President Donald Trump, according to investigative journalist Michael Schellenberger. So this guy's like, we hate USAID because it tried to get Trump impeached the first
no.
time
This is what when I was like the Hunter Biden laptop stuff, right? Like I was like, right. Because remember the impeachment thing was over like Trump attempting to extract like a promise of like political blackmail from Ukraine over Hunter Biden's laptop. That
Yes.
was the thing that like led to like the weird impeachment thing.
Well, there is a little bit of this in here in this press release. So it says USAID's defenders say it's about charity and development in poor nations. It's not. It's a $40 billion driver of regime change abroad. And now the evidence suggests that it, along with the CIA, were behind the 2019 impeachment of Trump, an illegal regime change effort at home. Schellenberg posted on X with an image of his Substack public story. So this is just this guy kind of ranting. And it's so funny because it's like, well, yeah, it is a driver of regime change. Um, and all of this stuff about it trying to do regime change at home though is just like kooky ramblings.
No, okay, but here's my take. That's kooky ramblings. USAID was doesn't give a shit about that. However, it's fully like it could like Trump could believe that.
He could. That's the thing. He
Like
totally could. And this guy is so fucking weird. This his actual like stuff he wrote I'm like, this is exactly the kind of shit that Trump could get into. And I'm pretty sure there's going to be a link in the show notes if you want to see this guy's kooky fucking weird rambling. So the press release continues. Schellenberger then posted a video and transcript detailing his findings, very kooky, surrounding the December 2019 impeachment that stemmed from a White House whistleblower claiming Trump abused his powers by withholding military aid to Ukraine in order to dig up dirt on his rival, former President Joe Biden. This is what you're talking about, David. The whistleblower claimed to have heard from White House staff that Trump directed Ukrainian President Zelensky to work with his personal attorney, Rudy Giuliani, to investigate Biden and his son, Hunter Biden. The whistleblower who triggered the impeachment was a CIA analyst who was first brought into the White House by the Obama administration, Schellenberger said in the interview. Of course, because you got to throw Obama under the bus in there somehow. It's Obama's fault if you're Trump. Now, it continues and says, reporting by Dropsite News last year revealed, very reputable, I'm sure, Dropsite News, revealed that the CIA analyst relied on reporting by a supposedly independent investigative news organization called the Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project, which appears to have effectively operated as an arm of the United States Agency for International Development, which President Trump has shut down. The CIA whistleblower complaint cited a long report by OCCRP 4 times. The OCCRP report alleged that 2 Soviet-born Florida businessmen were key hidden actors behind a plan by Trump to investigate the Bidens, and the businessmen connected Giuliani to 2 former Ukrainian prosecutors. In a 2024 documentary by German TV network NDR, a USAID official confirms that the agency approves OCCRP's annual work plan and approves new hires of key personnel. French investigative news organization Mediapart, which took part in the documentary, reported that NDR censored the broadcast after U.S. journalist Drew Sullivan, the co-founder and head of the OCCRP, placed pressure on the NDR management and made false accusations against the broadcaster's journalists involved in the project. Schellenberger went on to say that Sullivan told NDR and the OCCRP had probably been responsible for 5 or 6 countries changing over from one government to another government and getting prime ministers indicted or thrown out. As such, it appears that CIA, USAID, and OCCRP were all involved in the impeachment of President Trump in ways similar to the regime change operations of all 3 organizations engaging in abroad, Schellenberger said. The difference is that it is highly illegal and even treasonous for CIA, USAID, and its contractors and intermediaries to interfere in U.S. politics this way. Schellenberger said OCCRP threatened to file a lawsuit against Schellenberger's public in response to questions sent to the organization, though he added that neither OCCRP nor anyone else disproved Dropsite's allegations, and Dropsite stands by them. And the evidence does not support OCCRP's claim of journalistic independence, Schellenberger said. So this is why Donald Trump hates USAID. This whole mess of things.
Right. I tend to be like, okay, so like that's his like personal animus.
Yes.
Right.
And that's what this guy operates off of.
Sick, hell yeah. Be petty. That's fun for you. It's fun, but like I think like the Heritage Foundation thing about the unitary executive and like a change in the way in which US power projection operates, that to me seems like the real story. Like the weird animus stuff is like the is it's like a good read through the gossip columns in the morning, whereas it's like right like the thing about like how like a changing of the guard about how about the ideology underwriting how we project power, and what it means to project power from a kind of like carrot and a stick, and like we build houses and give people soccer balls and then like you know do regime change, to no, we're just going to do regime change and you're going to give us your shit, like right
Yeah,
where it's more
I wonder though if Trump understands that, because part of me thinks that this is something that other people are observing and they're trying to convince Trump to get in on it by appealing to his pettiness. I have something interesting in here about Elon Musk too that kind of plays into this, which these descriptions of like these men, Elon Musk and Donald Trump, getting upset and worked up over something seem consistent with their public personas for years. So I wonder if these guys don't even know that that's actually the play. Because I think you're right, that is the play. They want to basically take all the powers of multiple agencies and kind of push them into direct control by the president. And that's
Right.
kind of been what the Heritage Foundation has always been about. That's kind of what Project 2025 was always about. It's like a unique rereading of the Constitution that gives the president more power and other government agencies less power. But I almost feel like Donald Trump and Elon Musk are not aware that that is the game plan, and they are being pushed by people within their own party to basically get mad and worked up over silly things. Because I believe Trump actually does think that USAID is trying to do a regime change against Trump. Like, I think
No,
he
I
might
think that like
actually think that.
I think he believe and like I think that's like a really, as I said, it's like that's really fun gossip because it makes me happy to imagine that his ego was bruised by a bunch of the weirdest looking people in America yelling at him in Congress in 2018.
Yeah.
Um, right, like that that seemed like to me it's like the real story about American power is like this other one about an understanding that the sort of like unipolar like Americans like that's not going to happen anymore, and like a more direct hand is going to be necessary to maintain US hegemony abroad.
Yeah.
uh,
Well, okay, so the Elon Musk thing in here that is interesting to me is also petty gossip column stuff.
mm,
So Elon Musk publicly appears to have become fixated on USAID after a conservative activist named Mike Benz went on the Joe Rogan podcast to complain about USAID.
I hate that this is our politics.
Huh?
I hate that this is our
I
politics.
know. So Benz did serve at the State Department during Trump's first term, and on Joe Rogan's podcast, he said USAID is effectively a switch player to assist the Pentagon on the national security front, to assist the State Department on the national interest front, or to assist the intelligence community on a sort of clandestine operation front. Okay, I mean, that's true, objectively, regardless of your politics. That is what they do. But then Musk retweeted a summary of the appearance with text reading, Mike Benz just revealed everything, which is like, he didn't. We all know that's what they've been doing. The information has been public forever. It's not a conspiracy. It's like, I mean, it is a conspiracy. It's not a conspiracy theory, I don't think. It's very public. And then Musk said USAID was a viper's nest of radical left Marxists who hate America. Not true. Very right wing organization. Very anti Marxist. Very pro America. So less than an hour later, he highlighted another Ben's post commenting, USAID is a criminal organization. That one true, but not, I don't think, in the same way Musk thinks it is. At 1:54 a.m. the next day, he quoted Ben's and then said, we spent the weekend feeding USAID into the wood chipper. So this is like gets us pretty caught up. And I did just look up the most recent update I could find about USAID. It is Sunday, March 9th. And the most recent thing I could find was from March 7th. So that's Friday, last day in the news cycle. So, in the latest legal twist, this says Trump was given until 6 p.m. Monday. That's tomorrow. That's the day this episode comes out to pay the aid organizations that are suing it. And this is supposed to be the first concrete step towards the release of nearly $2 billion in suspended foreign aid. Judge Amir Ali had this order that had been bounced to the Supreme Court, which we talked about at the beginning of the first episode. Uh, this is just kind of what's going on. So we don't have any info until tomorrow, basically. And the basis for what's being contested is the constitutionality. So Peter Morocco, who's the head of, who's the acting deputy administrator of USAID, basically asked, is foreign aid constitutional? And that, I think, is actually a real question from a logistical standpoint. But this is the basis for the kind of Supreme Court ruling. This is going to be, whether it survives or not, is going to be based on this idea of whether or not it's constitutionally guaranteed, basically. And I don't, we're going to know more until tomorrow. What do you think?
I think if you are an unemployed former USAID worker and you are looking for maybe some like interesting money laundering slash maybe drop shipping style opportunities, hit us up on the Patreon. I don't think Madeline's got other shit she's trying to do.
Yeah. Hit David up on Patreon. David's got some career opportunities he'd like to talk
No,
about.
I feel like I want to collaborate. I want
Right.
brainstorm. Let's get this going. Let's
Let's make it. David's ready to do some deals.
Yeah.
We're ready for business.
I, you know, all right.
Okay, so that's the episode. I mean, is there any key takeaway before we get more updates on what actually happens with USAID? I mean, I think for me, the key takeaway that I want everybody to remember is keep your wits about you. Don't be a reactionary. The enemy of your enemy is not your friend. Just because
You're
USAID,
saying,
huh?
don't be a you're like, don't just react. Like it's like not, don't be like a political reactionary
No,
like
that
that.
too, actually.
But like,
Both of them.
don't just like react to everything in a state. Like don't
I think
like
the two are linked. I like to use them as part of the same political outlook.
no, but sure. But I do think there is like everyone like I wonder if like somewhere someone was like fishing around the bottom of their like trunk or whatever in their house and like looking for like a pink pussy hat and their like Mueller sexual mug. Um
I forgot
and
about Mueller sexual.
and they're like, we need Robert Mueller, or who was the tall one? Comey. James,
Homie.
we need James Comey. Put out the Comey bat signal. Don't do that. That's my don't be normal. Don't do that.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you don't want to. This is the thing. If you don't keep your wits about you, you might end up accidentally defending an organization that forcefully sterilized women in Peru, that abducted and killed and tortured unhoused people in Uruguay, that, has platformed Nazis to lead revolutions. You don't want to accidentally get so wrapped up in hating Donald Trump, which, we all fucking hate Donald Trump. He's a fucking weird piece of shit and he shouldn't have power and he's fucking strange. And it's very bizarre and disturbing that this man has any political power in any country whatsoever. Um, but don't get so wrapped up in that hatred that you accidentally end up supporting the eugenicist, sterilizing Nazi torturers.
Not affiliated. Let's.
I'm sorry, Nazi affiliated. Good, great clarification, David.
I just want to make it clear.
Yeah. You see three Nazis sitting at a table with one not Nazi. You see three Nazis and one Nazi affiliated person. That's David's take.
I'm just saying to anyone who's like interested in my drop shipping / money laundering scheme, like what Madeline says is that like she and I are different people.
Different people, different politics. David rocked against Bush. I voted for Leonard Peltier.
I swear, okay, if it like this is one thing. I don't care how much or little you care about like early 2000s Southern California punk, uh, like fat record style,
pop punk, yeah.
whatever the fuck had no effects is, or whatever. Some of I hate like that is something I never got. Like no matter how Central Californian I ever was, I fucking hated that shit. But if you would like to be entertained after this 3+ hour thing,
sorry.
Go listen to any just like Google or like put into your podcast player Fat Mike interview, and they are, you will be shocked if you don't know much about like I'm gonna leave it for the end because all
okay, I'm Googling it now to watch as soon as we finish recording.
Okay. On that note, as like just a plug for the Fat Mike brand, I think let's say good night.
We're done. We're wrapping it. The longest episode ever. All right, everybody. Thank you so much.